Stop! A great many imperial suns moved, intercepting Ling Han. If they were all in the core formation tier, Ling Han wouldn't be afraid at all. To say nothing of 8 or 10 imperial suns, even if there were 100 of them, it wouldn't matter. With his powerful physique and crushing power, he would be able to easily defeat all of them. However, he couldn't do this now. These imperial suns were all at the true self tier, and their battle prowess was no weaker than Ling Han's. Only 2 of them had to join forces and they would be able to block Ling Han's attacks. Ling Han stopped and did not pursue any further, because this was pointless effort. However, his eyes were like blades, sweeping over these imperial suns, and he asked balefully, "You guys really want to oppose me?" These people did not stop Wuxia when he had just made his move, but chose to interfere when Wuxia was defeated. This was an obvious show of partiality, and were not mediating at all. Thus, Ling Han's heart was burning with fury. "Ling Han, do you know what this place is?" An imperial sun rebuked. "This is an unknown, dangerous area. Everyone must work together. Otherwise, none of you will be able to leave alive." Ling Han waved his hand dismissively. "Whatever you say, since you have decided to make an enemy of me, I will remember all of you. In future, there will be a time for reckoning." "Ling Han, you are too arrogant," Imperial Sun Shi Yuanjin said coldly. "In this world, there is no one, no force that can challenge the Imperial clan," another Imperial Sun declared. Ling Han smiled faintly. "What you mean is that only you guys can bully others, and definitely cannot allow others to fight back, right? You guys bully others, and that is natural, and if others fight back, that would be treason." The Imperial Suns did not speak, but their expressions were all proud. Their meaning could not be more obvious. The Imperial clan was just that high and mighty. In front of the Imperial clan, even the members of the Holy Land were like ants. Ling Han withdrew his gaze and said to Lin Luo and the others, "Let's go." Lin Luo, the large black dog, and the others all nodded, their expressions solemn and filled with fury. These imperial clans were too arrogant and domineering, and this kind of confidence was merely because their ancestors had once produced a great emperor and had been blessed by him. They left. Though this was a place of protection, they could not possibly stay here forever. That would only be waiting for death. However, the team that had followed them previously stayed behind. No matter how they looked at it, it was safe to stay here and wait for others to save them. The saint outside had been trying to undo the seal all this while, and though that was a great emperor-level seal, it was more or less worn out. They were sure that with the saint's abilities, he would be able to undo it not too long after. At that time, the saint would enter the arena. In this era when there were no emperors in the world, how could the saint with the imperial weapon not be able to sweep aside all opposition? Ling Han naturally wouldn't force them. It wasn't like they were building a base and forming a team, so he couldn't be bothered to pay them any attention. The group continued onwards. Though the environment here was dim, it was not completely dark. They could still see the path ahead of them. They left, and not too long after, Ling Han suddenly smelt a refreshing fragrance, causing his whole person to feel excited. "Smells good," the little azure dragon also immediately said. The large black dog and Lin Luo nodded in agreement. They could also smell the fragrance of the flower. Why does Grandpa Dragon feel like this flower's fragrance is sensed and not smelt?" the little azure dragon mumbled. "What a joke! How could one possibly sense the fragrance of the flowers?" The large black dog immediately shook his head. Yet a thought flashed through Ling Han's mind. He covered his nose, but the refreshing fragrance still did not disperse. He nodded. "I can indeed sense the fragrance of this flower." Everyone was extremely curious, and they all closed their noses to make an attempt. Sure enough, this was the case. How strange. What kind of flower is this? Let's go take a look. They began to search, but the fragrance of this flower could be sensed through divine sense, so it was also very difficult to search, because it was different from the standard way one could trace smell. However, the closer they got, the denser the fragrance of the flower became in their minds. They could still approach endlessly. Not too long later, they finally saw a flower. It was completely snow white and was about the size of a bowl. This flower was very amazing. It had no leaves, and there was only one flower blooming. There were a total of 5 petals, and it was exuding a soft luster. Grandpa Dragon discovered it first. The little azure dragon immediately howled, and was the first to charge out. Fuck! Do you know what it means to respect your elders? The large black dog also darted out. He naturally had to obtain this kind of treasure himself. Old Black, do you know what it means to cherish the young? The little azure dragon didn't back down either. Four-legged snake, you're an old monster from who knows how many years ago, and you still have the face to pretend to be young? The large black dog barked. Then you should respect your elders even more, the little azure dragon said proudly. As they fought, they continued to fly, and had already arrived at the side of that glowing white flower. They both stretched out their claws to pluck it. Shwa! Right at this moment, a saber light flashed past, and a person charged out, attacking them at the same time. Old Black. The little azure dragon kicked the large black dog aside, raising its arms to block the saber light. Shwa! A fountain of blood gushed out. The claws of the little azure dragon were already dripping with blood. The person who attacked showed no mercy. With a twist of the blade, he once again swept towards the little azure dragon. Humph! Ling Han had already charged over, and shot out a punch, which landed on the back of the saber. Wong! The saber trembled slightly, and was instantly swept aside. Motherfucker! What the hell is this? The little azure dragon finally had the time to look at the sneak attacker, and couldn't help but feel shocked. Ling Han took a deep breath and said, "Een Soul." He finally understood why there was a bone-chilling cold here, and why the true self-tier elites couldn't draw on the regulations of heaven and earth. The reason was very simple. This was the netherworld. In the netherworld, the regulations of heaven and earth were naturally bone-chilling, and he was also unable to draw on the regulations of heaven and earth. The regulations of heaven and earth here were completely different. Previously, he had entered the netherworld in his soul form, but this time it was his physical body, so the feeling was completely different, so he did not manage to react at the first instant. No wonder he had sensed this flower's fragrance with his divine sense. In the netherworld, nothing had a physical body. They were all in soul form. What Een Soul? What the hell is Een Soul? The little azure dragon blinked its eyes. Though it was an old monster from millions and millions of years ago, it was actually as naive as an infant. It's a ghost! Ling Han shouted loudly, and took the initiative to charge towards the Een Soul. This was a true self-tier Een Soul. Its power was very strong, but it could not use the regulations of heaven and earth. This kind of true self-tier could only be considered a stronger core formation tier at most, so Ling Han naturally did not cower. Shwa! The Een Soul brandished its saber in a slash. Ling Han took it head-on with his fists, but this Een Soul's power was stronger, and the saber's blade was also extremely sharp, slashing his fists to the point that blood was beginning to seep out. Humph! I don't know how many true self-tier Een Souls I've killed, and I still can't do anything to you? He humphed lightly. Destructive energy was activated. This could allow him to defeat the strong while he himself was weaker. The moment this high-level energy appeared, that Een Soul immediately looked wary. Though its intelligence could only be considered half-awakened, it instinctively feared the destructive energy. I'll send you on your way. Ling Han unleashed a barrage of attacks, and it wasn't long before he dealt with this Een Soul. Een Soul was not strong. Even if they were at the true self tier without martial arts techniques, they couldn't draw on heaven and earth's regulations. They could be wounded by high-level energy. They had too many weaknesses. However, there was probably no one else that could deal with it as easily as Ling Han. Going by that theory, this is Netherworld? Lin Luo walked over. He had naturally heard Ling Han's words just now. Ling Han nodded and said, "This is a connection point with the Netherworld. It was sealed by the Holy Emperor using a powerful technique, but after such a long time, this seal has loosened. Going by the looks of it, it won't be long before the seal loses its effects completely. At that time, a large number of Een Souls will penetrate deeply, and it will be inevitable that a great battle will break out. Everyone was solemn. They had just entered into this space, and had already encountered a true self-tier in soul. Then, there would be no need for other spirit transformation tier in souls to appear. As long as there were more true self-tier in souls, they would have a hard time. This place is really dangerous, Lin Luo exclaimed, but an expectant expression appeared on his face. He had once been the strongest heavenly venerable tier elite in the Genesis world. Faced with danger, he could only muster up the strength and confidence to challenge them. Let go. This belongs to Grandpa Dog. No, it belongs to Grandpa Dragon. On the sidelines, the large black dog and little azure dragon were already fighting. They both wanted to snatch that peculiar flower. Ling Han sighed. How could it be that these two guys did not have the slightest bit of awareness? He moved, suppressing both dog and dragon, and then went to study that peculiar flower. I don't know how to describe this celestial medicine either, Ling Han said. This isn't a physical body, and it's actually just a ball of energy. It's nourishing to the soul. No wonder that Yin soul would set up an ambush here. It has probably been nurtured by this celestial medicine for a long time, and that is why it has slowly developed intelligence, Lin Luo said from the sidelines. Ling Han nodded and said, that Yin soul seemed to realize that being slowly nurtured by the celestial flower, its effects are better than directly consuming it. It only charged out when we were about to harvest it. From this, it can be seen that the intelligence of this Yin soul is already quite shocking. Hiss, if there are many such celestial flowers here, then wouldn't there be countless Yin souls that have gained intelligence? The large black dog approached and said. Ling Han pondered for a moment, then said, aside from celestial medicines, Yin souls can also devour each other, strengthening their abilities and developing intelligence. Thus, there should be no shortage of powerful Yin souls here. He had entered the netherworld with his soul before, but the most powerful Yin soul there was only sect master tier level. Furthermore, it was possible that even more powerful Yin souls were deliberately rearing it, nurturing it until venerate tier level before eating it. It was unknown what level the strongest Yin soul in this area was. If a venerate tier elite appeared, then even if the Yin soul wasn't strong, it could still easily crush its opponents with its cultivation level. We have to be careful. When it came to a matter of life and death, even the large black dog and the little azure dragon didn't dare to be careless. They nodded one after another, their expressions serious. Then what about this flower? The large black dog asked, licking his lips. Ling Han thought for a moment, then said, the strength of my soul has already reached the level of spirit transformation tier. This celestial flower doesn't have much effect on me, so I won't participate in the distribution. However, I think there should be no shortage of such celestial medicines here, so why don't we take turns? Then Grandpa Dog will be the first. No, Grandpa Dragon is the first. The two troublemakers began to fight again. Ling Han sighed and said, you guys just do rock, paper, scissors. Okay. Hunyo's interest was instantly piqued. They played rock, paper, scissors, and Hunyo easily won first place. Was this the true dragon of fortune showing its might? Hunyo plucked the celestial flower, but there was no need for her to consume it at all. This celestial flower directly fused into the palm of her hand, and her spirit immediately improved greatly. In fact, she could even see it clearly from the outside. It was like a furnace, soaring straight into the heavens. Nyo, hurry up and suppress it, Ling Han hurriedly said. Hunyo nodded, and used her mystical power to wrap around it tightly, not allowing the soul light to rush out of her body. Otherwise, the souls of living people were greatly nutritious for Yin souls. Yin souls in the distance would immediately swarm over like sharks that had smelt blood. They had to be careful here, but they couldn't do nothing. Moreover, there was obviously a great opportunity here. If they didn't hurry, it would be snatched by others. After walking for a while, as expected, they discovered another spirit-type celestial medicine. 3, 4, 5. There were really quite a lot of spirit-type celestial medicines here, but some were true self tier level, some were cauldron forging tier level, but none were spirit transformation tier level. Aside from that, they also discovered even more corpses of saints. They were burning fiercely, and they could chase away the cold just by being close. In these 2 days, they had gathered over 100 celestial medicines, but not a single one was suitable for Ling Han. Another day later, the situation finally changed. Ling Han saw a familiar scene again. Countless Yin souls formed a long queue, and were presently advancing in the same direction. The end could not be seen with a single glance, and the length of the queue was astonishingly long. This is a good chance. Lin Luo and the others were all rubbing their hands in anticipation. They had all heard Ling Han say that killing Yin souls in the netherworld could strengthen one's soul. Yin and Yang could complement each other. The Yin souls here were not strong, and were just right for sweeping through. Xiao, xiao, xiao. They charged out and channeled high-level energy one after another, beginning the massacre. Yin soul didn't have a physical body, so mystical power attacks were ineffective. Only high-level energy could cause damage to it. However, after a period of slaughter, Lin Luo and the others all retreated, shaking their heads. Their souls had not strengthened. Why not? Could it be because I entered this place as a soul the last time? Ling Han asked. That might have been blocked by our physical bodies, Lin Luo said. Try again. The moment you kill one, release your physical body. They tried again, and this time they succeeded. However, the physical body would also block a considerable amount of Yin soul energy, they all said. Ling Han smiled and said, You guys don't have to worry about the conversion rate at all. There are too many Yin souls here, and they can easily send the strength of your souls to the true self tier, but after this, how to kill Yin souls of the true self tier is the real difficulty. They didn't have the destructive energy, so it was too difficult for them to battle above their cultivation level. Furthermore, there are ghost spirit crystals here that can increase the strength of the soul. This would be even more helpful in increasing the strength of the soul. All right, let's go find a mine, the large black dog said. Ling Han pondered for a moment. The situation here was more or less the same as last time. The only thing that could not be confirmed was what level of Yin Soul elite possessed this territory. The stronger the boss was, the stronger the generals under his command would naturally be. In his soul form, Ling Han was no longer restrained. Relying on the freakish intimidation of the destructive energy, he could just barely put up a fight against a spirit transformation tier Yin Soul. However, he couldn't do that now. His soul was restrained by his physical body. His strength had clearly increased, but his ability to suppress Yin souls had instead decreased. He explained his concerns, and everyone fell silent. It's not that there's no way, the little azure dragon said. We can't resist the cold here now, not because body art can't, but because we haven't crossed the threshold of true self tier yet. For mystical power cultivators, the true self tier is a barrier, but for body arts, isn't it the same? According to the little azure dragon, once one advanced into the true self tier, body arts could also undergo an earth-shattering change. Although it wasn't as exaggerated as mystical power cultivators, the boiling of one's blood and qi meant that resisting this coldness was at least a piece of cake. It should be known that Yin souls are most afraid of the toughest and strongest yang blood and qi. So us body arts cultivators are the nemesis of Yin souls. The little azure dragon proudly said that the ancestor of body arts was definitely a true dragon. Unfortunately, this was not passed on, and there was a lapse until the little azure dragon was born. All right, then we'll break through to the true self tier first. Ling Han nodded, then frowned. The question is, can we break through to the true self tier in the netherworld? Didn't you see that those true self tier cultivators were unable to draw on the regulations of heaven and earth? It should be possible, Lin Luo said in a low voice. After cultivating to the end of the core formation tier, shards of regulations have already been left in our bodies. We only need to refine these regulations, and it would be enough for us to complete that crucial leap. However, this isn't the living realm after all. Thus, we're unable to obtain the pouring of power from the heaven and earth, so it'll definitely be slightly inferior. The little azure dragon continued, That's all right. At least in body art, we can still advance. That's right. The Heavenly Dragon Emperor technique used high-level energy to temper the physical body, and even in the netherworld, high-level energy could still be communicated. Everyone reached a consensus, but breaking through a major tier wasn't something that could be done with mere thought. Though Ling Han, the little dragon, and the large black dog had already reached the end of the core formation tier, Ling Han and the little dragon still needed some time to accumulate their power. Only the large black dog was already capable of taking that step. However, the large black dog had just begun to cultivate the core formation tier chapter of the Heavenly Dragon Emperor technique. It was meaningless even if he broke through to the true self tier, because the body art couldn't keep up. Ling Han decided to first find the ghost spirit crystal and complete his accumulation in battle. They followed the army of Yin Soul soldiers, and soon arrived at the place where the ghost spirit crystals were placed, and where Yin Souls were lured to kill each other. They moved, and this naturally drew out the powerful Yin Soul soldiers that were on standby. They were still true self-tier level but had completely developed intelligence. After capturing this Yin Soul, after a round of interrogation, this Yin Soul knew nothing about the ghost spirit crystal mine. Alright, this level was too low, so it was normal that he did not know. Everyone continued to battle. Since they had nothing else to do, they might as well nurture themselves through battle. They wreaked havoc here, killing a great many true self-tier level Yin Souls, and finally drew out the great monsters. 5 days later, a spirit transformation tier level Yin Soul appeared, and discovered them from afar. Then, it flew over and launched a fierce offensive. The moment they exchanged blows, Ling Han felt a mountain of pressure. In the past, he had also teamed up with Qi Menghan, and they used the Heavenly Brilliance technique together to kill a spiritual transformation tier monster. Now that he was alone, even if his abilities had greatly improved, it was still not enough to fight against it. "Retreat!" he shouted lightly, covering everyone's retreat. Thankfully, destructive energy was a great threat to any Yin Soul. Even a great Yin Soul of spirit transformation tier didn't dare to force him too far. But it didn't give up, following Ling Han all the way. This was troublesome. Bringing such a burden, there was no peace at all. But he had already provoked him, so what else could he do? They fought as they retreated. Thankfully, the destructive energy was strong enough, so the great Yin Soul was still extremely wary. As time passed, Ling Han and the others were starting to struggle to hold up. This was because the coldness of this place was far too terrifying. They needed to constantly use high-level energy to resist it, and this was far too taxing on their spiritual power. They had no option but to retreat to the nearest location where the corpses of the saints lay. They needed to rest and reorganize there. Several hours later, they arrived at their destination. This was the femur of a saint and was several hundred meters long. It was exuding a powerful aura unique to saints, as if it wanted to tear apart the heavens itself. This saint's bone was burning, releasing azure flames, completely expelling the coldness. Ling Han and the others hurriedly rushed over. They were about to reach their limit. They discovered that the great Yin Soul actually stopped far away and did not pursue them any further. Could it be that he doesn't dare to come over? The large black dog speculated. That should be the case. Lin Luo nodded. Looks like even after the saint from the living realm died, a terrifying aura would still be released, which would have the effect of restraining Yin Souls. This was a discovery that they had come across by accident. By the looks of it, not only could the corpse of a saint resist the extreme cold, it could also deter Yin Souls. It was a true sanctuary. Everyone hurriedly rested, recovering their spiritual power. This was different from mystical power. It did not come from the power of heaven and earth. One only needed to get enough rest and would naturally recover. A day later, Ling Han took the initiative to step out to meet this great Yin Soul head-on. Grandpa Dragon is coming too. The little azure dragon also joined the battle. Though the Yin Soul was not strong, this was a spiritual transformation tier-level monster, after all. After a short battle, Ling Han and the little azure dragon were riddled with wounds. Their physical bodies were practically ineffective against the attacks of the Yin Soul, and the attacks could reach directly into their minds. Thus, what it had wounded was their divine sense. Thankfully, it was not heavy. They both knew their limits and saw it as a tempering. Unfortunately, this Yin Soul was too strong, and was only suitable for Ling Han and the little azure dragon to temper themselves. If anyone else went up, their soul would definitely be destroyed at the first instant, and their physical body would be possessed. Fighting like this, 7 days later, Ling Han and Little Azure Dragon stopped attacking. There was no further need. In these few days of intense battles, they had already completed the accumulation of their cultivation level, and could take the next step. The man and dragon both started to break through to the true self tier, and the large black dog started breaking through a day before them. At this time, Ling Han's primal chaos celestial core had long since liquefied completely, turning into an alchemy pool, and in the alchemy pool, there were regulations floating and sinking, totaling 9. If he wanted to become a true self-tier elite, he would have to use the regulations to create the true self and manifest all the regulations into the true self. This meant that he had completed the first step of the true self tier. However, the true self tier's 4 forms could only be completely stabilized after 4 transformations. At that time, one would be able to advance to the next cultivation level, spirit transformation tier. For ordinary cultivators of the core formation tier, they had only needed to inscribe the 3 regulations of the true self tier on the celestial core. Thus, it was also very easy to complete the true self because there were very few true selves. Ling Han was different. He had a total of 9 regulations. Now, there was a problem of which regulation he should first construct. Logically speaking, there was nothing to hesitate about. It must be the destruction regulation which was the most powerful. However, the problem was that Ling Han had never comprehended the destruction regulation before. This was completely because of the power of dimension in his body, allowing him to easily grasp it. However, the true self tier was the stage when one truly began to interact with the regulations of heaven and earth. If one wanted to comprehend the true self tier, what could they do? Ling Han only hesitated for a moment, but still decided to first gnaw on a tough nut like the destruction regulation. That was because he would have to touch it sooner or later. It was better to do it earlier than later. This was a kind of self-confidence. Sometimes, confidence was really very important. Alright, he would start from regulation of destruction. Ling Han took a deep breath and extracted the regulation of destruction from the alchemy pool. Using this as the structure, he molded the true self. The true self tier was a transition to spirit transformation tier. What was spiritual transformation tier? The true self and spirit transformation were like doppelgangers. They could roam the world. Thus, the stronger the true self tier was, the stronger the spiritual body it manifested. Ling Han began to construct the true self of destruction. He used the regulation of destruction as the structure, and the alchemical fluid as his blood and flesh, forming a ball of primal chaos that could not be seen clearly. This was natural. The true self had a total of 4 forms, and it was only when it reached the 4th form that the true self could truly be formed. Pa! This ball of matter very quickly shattered, and fell into the alchemy pool. The first attempt was declared a failure. Ling Han naturally didn't pay any heed to this. It would be far too easy to complete this step in a single stroke. Moreover, he was creating the true self of destruction. He began to study the regulation of destruction. Now that he had reached this stage, he was tentatively qualified to do so. However, the regulation of destruction was too mysterious. This was a 10-star high-level energy, and even the great emperor had not touched it before. Though he possessed it, it was not his own power. Thus, no matter how hard he tried, it was completely useless. After failing several times in a row, a thought flashed in Ling Han's head. Since he had relied on the power of dimension in his body to cultivate destructive energy, could he comprehend it with the power of dimension in his body? Let's give it a try. He stimulated the power of dimensions, then reconstructed the true self of destruction. Skeleton formed, flesh grew, and everything was as it had been before. Then this true self was about to begin crumbling, but right at this moment, the power of dimension activated. Though it was weak, it had a miraculous effect. The regulation of destruction stabilized, and no longer resisted, acting obediently. The true self continued to form, and everything went extremely smoothly. It was only a day, and the true self of destruction had already been completed, turning into a clay figure. The true self tier. This was the first step, clay fetus. Next, he would have to strengthen the true self of destruction, and when it had reached the pinnacle, he would be able to create a second true self, right until the regulations in the alchemy pool had been completely constructed into true selves. In this way, the first form of the true self was completed, and he could begin to shape it. Wang. In Ling Han's mind, a human figure that was shining with golden light immediately appeared. He held a slashing saber and launched an attack at Ling Han. It was an internal demon. Ling Han was unafraid. He didn't even need to use the 6 characters Bright King Curse, and activated the true self of destruction to greet the incoming attack. How dare you? You actually dare to steal such great power? This internal demon shouted loudly, as if it was extremely furious. Ling Han laughed loudly and ignored him completely. The true self of destruction directly crashed into him. The strength of his soul was comparable to the spirit transformation tier. Killing the internal demon was naturally a piece of cake for him, and he dealt with it in a few moves. Ling Han suddenly opened his eyes, and a streak of divine light shot out, directly illuminating heaven and earth. Boom! A devastating aura erupted from his body, causing Lin Luo, the Empress, and the others to feel suffocated. He was now in the true self tier, so his aura was naturally terrifying. Ling Han, you've broken through? Lin Luo appeared to be in disbelief. From the core formation tier to the true self tier, no matter how smooth the process was, it would take at least 10 days, right? You took care of it in a single day? What a joke! Ling Han was also very surprised. If he switched to using the other regulations in the alchemy pool, then it would definitely take more than a day for him to successfully mold the true self. No matter how freakish he was, it would still take at least 5 to 6 days. However, the destructive energy was clearly the most profound, yet with the help of the power of dimension within his body, it easily transformed into the true self. It was as if the heavens were helping him. Ling Han nodded. He looked at the sky, and there was a completely different kind of comprehension. It was as if the heaven and earth had appeared in front of him in another form, as if it was within reach, allowing him to comprehend and understand. No wonder it was said that only those at the true self tier could truly cultivate the regulations of heaven and earth. So that was how it was. Haha. Nyo's Ling Han is really awesome. Hunyo laughed, and jumped into Ling Han's arms like a kitten. Ling Han laughed loudly. After conversing with the others for a while, he began to test out his current strength. Before I broke through, my power was comparable to the 3rd heaven of the true self tier. Now, I'm about at the 6th heaven, which is comparable to the middle stage of the true self tier. He casually threw a punch, and the mystical power was stimulated by the true self of destruction, causing his power to increase in a breakthrough manner. Furthermore, this was activated by the true self of destruction, so it naturally had a sliver of the true self of destruction in it, greatly increasing its destructive power. However, his body art was still stuck on the level of the core formation tier. In this place, regulations don't appear, so I have no way to continue cultivating. Ling Han nodded internally. This was the netherworld, and he couldn't grasp the regulations of heaven and earth at all. Thus, his cultivation level was stuck at this level. However, body art isn't affected. Ling Han began to cultivate the true self tier chapter of the Heavenly Dragon Emperor technique. This time, he directly used 5-star energy to temper himself. Woo! How violent was the destructive power of 5-star energy. He was naturally drawing fire onto himself, and almost killed himself directly. Thankfully, he had established a strong foundation previously, and his physique was tough enough to withstand such torment. After spending 5 days, Ling Han finally channeled the True Self tier chapter fully. Instantly, multiple dragon scales appeared on the surface of his body, exuding a dragon's might. Ling Han frowned upon hearing this. He was a human, so he didn't have the slightest interest in becoming a dragon, even if this was a being with the highest status in the world. All techniques are natural, so dragon scales are only a symbol, he thought. Then why couldn't it be reflected in other ways? He explored deeply and gained repeated enlightenment. Haha! Grandpa Dragon has broken through. The little azure dragon let out a loud roar. Boom! It unleashed an astonishing aura. He took a look, and when he saw Ling Han sitting cross-legged on the ground, he thought that Ling Han was still trying to break through to the true self tier. Previously, he had been completely engrossed and had no idea what had happened at all, so he couldn't help but feel proud, finally surpassing Ling Han for once. Ling Han broke through 5 days ago, the Empress said calmly. There was a proud expression on her face. What? The little azure dragon was instantly dumbfounded. Are you joking? Nyo's Ling Han is much more powerful than you. Nyo added insult to injury. The little azure dragon felt a pain in its chest. Hiss, it had only been 6 days and it had already completed its breakthrough. This was overwhelmingly awesome. Even if it was not number 1 in history, it was not that far off either. But he was actually still inferior to Ling Han, and the gap was not just a little bit. Damn it! The little azure dragon also sat down. He was going to begin cultivating the true self-tier chapter of the Heavenly Dragon Emperor technique. He didn't believe that he would fall behind Ling Han in this area. Another 2 days later, the large black dog finally completed his breakthrough and advanced into the true self-tier. Time flew by and 4 days quickly passed. Ling Han's body began to exude an unstable yet incredibly powerful aura, as if it had solidified. Wave after wave, it was about to push the Empress, Lin Luo, and the others out. He was now in the true self-tier, and even the power that was unconsciously seeping out was still terrifying. The Empress and the others were completely unable to resist it. But it should be known that, in the distance, there was also a great Yin soul that was restless. Ling Han, Nyo hurriedly shouted. Ling Han shuddered, and when he came back to his senses, his aura instantly ebbed like the ebbing tide, all of it absorbed into his body. Multiple seals appeared on the surface of his body, looking a little like dragon scales. Ling Han had succeeded. He removed the dragon scales and replaced them with pure seals, because this was actually also an application of the energy of heaven and earth, and seals were the most primitive display. The dragon scales, on the other hand, were a kind of transformation of seals. Thus, the appearance of dragon scales or feathers was actually not a problem. Ling Han very easily reconstructed the dragon scales, presenting them in the most primitive way. Io! The little azure dragon was cultivating, so it was caught off guard and instantly lost its balance. Who sneak attacked Grandpa Dragon? He shouted. Ling Han laughed loudly. Come! Let's kill the enemy. He charged out and took the initiative to greet that great Yin soul. Boom, destructive energy surged, its might boundless. Ling Han couldn't help but feel surprised. This was because he clearly hadn't obtained the 4th corner of the spirit diagram of destructive energy. However, the might of this high-level energy had forcibly increased by a significant amount. Indeed, his cultivation level had increased, and the level of his soul had also risen to another level. This would allow the destructive energy to become even stronger. But this leap shouldn't have been as great as this, right? In an instant, realization dawned on Ling Han. The true self-tier. This was a barrier. After crossing this barrier, one would be able to use the regulations of heaven and earth, and high-level energy could actually be categorized into this category. Moreover, starting from the true self-tier, he had to cultivate power, and the importance of spiritual power had also suddenly increased to another level. Why? The stronger the spiritual power, the more high-level energy and regulations of heaven and earth could be mobilized. Ling Han charged over and threw a punch. The great Yin soul returned the attack, but this caused the destructive energy to boil and charge towards it. It immediately released a sharp scream on the level of divine sense, appearing to be in extreme pain. Destructive energy was extremely destructive to both living beings and Yin souls. Even if there was a gap of a major cultivation level, it still suffered a massive impact, and one of its arms was immediately severed. Fortunately, the Yin soul didn't have a physical body, and its arms were only manifestations. It immediately grew a new arm, but its size suddenly shrunk by a size. Ling Han laughed loudly. Previously, he had been extremely disheveled from being pursued by this large monster. And now, the tables had finally turned. Die! He unleashed his full battle prowess, unleashing a barrage of murderous aura, but it no longer reached with just a thought. Instead, it had taken the form of a small black figure, with obvious traces of trajectory. The large Yin soul didn't dare to oppose him anymore, and hurriedly turned around to flee. Ling Han was hot on his heels, and after spending some effort, he finally got rid of this large Yin soul. He released his physical body, and felt a sliver of energy surge into his body, nourishing his soul, which had a slight improvement. Couldn't be helped. His present physique was too tough. Not only did it prevent attacks from entering, it even treated all beneficial energy equally. Ling Han was slightly depressed. Looks like if he wanted to improve the strength of his soul, he would have to kill a terrifyingly large number of spirit transformation tier Yin souls. Sigh. He walked back, and shockingly discovered that the coldness here had suddenly decreased by a level. And it was not that the coldness had decreased, but rather that his physique had improved to another level which had the effect of resisting the coldness. The little azure dragon wasn't wrong. After he advanced into the true self tier, the might of body art was further unleashed. Little Han, how about it? Isn't the heavenly dragon emperor technique awesome? The little azure dragon said proudly. Impressive. Ling Han nodded, as expected of a technique created by a great emperor. Perhaps only the true dragon would be able to do so, because there was only one true dragon in the world, and it had reached such a high level in body art. The other great emperors wanted to create body arts, but they could not possibly reach this kind of height. At most, they could only have their physiques reach saint tier level. They continued to set out in search of the peculiar flower and ghost spirit crystals. At present, Ling Han had already advanced into the true self tier, and could even kill spirit transformation tier Yin souls. He had practically no qualms, and could be invincible. On the other hand, Ling Han was still very expectant of encountering great Yin souls of spirit transformation tier, which could nourish his soul. Ling Han no longer needed to rely on the flames burning on the corpse of the saint to dispel the chill. The same was true for the little azure dragon. Their physiques were tough enough, but Hunyo, the empress, and the others were still unable to do so. Every once in a while they would have to look for the corpse of the saint. 2 days later, they arrived at the corpse of another saint. This was a skull, and it was 9,000 feet tall. It was like a colossal city. When they saw this skull, everyone exclaimed in surprise. That was because the bones of the saint previously were all burning with green flames, but this one was blue in color. Could it be that it wasn't produced by the same saint? Perhaps it is the skull that is more special? Ling Han sensed for a while and said, it should be 2 saints. The color of these flames are different, and it should be because regulations are different. Fuck. Then how many saints are buried here? The large black dog almost jumped. This was where the great emperor suppressed. However, even though there was a great emperor, at least 2 saints had still died. In fact, even the remains of the corpses had been left behind in the netherworld. According to legends, the descending heaven holy emperor battled all his life, not even leaving behind any descendants or heirs. From this, it can be seen just how powerful his enemies are. Ling Han said slowly, perhaps, the netherworld also has great elites, enough to give even the ancestral king a headache. Everyone exchanged looks. Could it be that netherworld beings also had great emperor beings? When they thought of this possibility, everyone felt a fear that caused their hair to stand on end. Yin and Yang were opposites, and there was absolutely no possibility of coexistence. Furthermore, if the netherworld beings were to attack under the leadership of a great emperor, what force in the living realm would be able to stop them? What is this? Hunyo bent down and picked up a bone. This was a tortoise shell, but it was not complete. It was like a yin-yang fish with only half of it left. Treasure! The large black dog immediately snatched it over, and began to rub its paws together. However, it soon looked embarrassed and angry. It threw away the tortoise shell. This was an extremely ordinary tortoise shell. He had been tricked. Ling Han picked up the tortoise shell again. He activated his eye technique and looked over, but couldn't see anything special about it. After some thought, he still decided to put this thing away. He wanted to store the tortoise shell into his spatial spirit tool. In any case, it didn't take up much space, but he discovered that he couldn't store this thing in. An incredibly ordinary tortoise shell actually couldn't be stored into a spatial tool? Merely from this aspect, this thing was not ordinary. Furthermore, why had this been discovered beside the bones of a saint? Ling Han put the tortoise shell into his pocket and decided to study it carefully after he left. Perhaps there were no regulations of the living realm here, and that was why the tortoise shell did not show its brilliance. The large black dog shook his head and said, "Ha! Little Han, do you really care about this broken tortoise shell?" Ling Han smiled and said, "It might be useful." He didn't reveal the truth, and he planned to share it with the others after discovering its uses. "Rest for a while and we'll leave." They recovered for a while and were just planning to continue onwards when they saw a figure flying towards them from afar. His speed was extraordinarily fast, and he had not even neared them when they already felt a great aura that could suppress heaven and earth. Hiss, sect master level. Ling Han waited here for many days and finally attracted a sect master in soul. Even if Ling Han had already advanced into the true self tier and possessed destructive energy, he still didn't dare to face the might of a sect master in soul. That's right. When he was in the true self tier, he had already been on the same level as a in soul of spirit transformation tier. However, at that time, he had already reached the consummate level of the core formation tier. Now, however, he was only in the early stage of the true self tier. The gap between them was extremely large. This great in soul descended. As a sect master, its intelligence was naturally completely awakened. Thus, the human figure it took form in was also incredibly vivid. It looked coldly at Ling Han and the others. "It was you damn insects that killed my subordinates." "That's right, it's your grandpa dragon." "So what? If you can, come bite Grandpa Dragon." The little azure dragon began to act despicable, continuously waving its claws at the great Een Soul. The large Een Soul was not angered, and his expression was still cold. The fact that you can enter into this space means that the seal is about to be unsealed. "Haha! With the help of your bodies, I can go out and take a look. Come on! Come on!" The little azure dragon crooked a claw at him. Meanwhile, the large black dog jeered. "Old geezer, you can tolerate that?" In any case, Grandpa Dog can't tolerate that. If it was Grandpa Dog, I would have long since beaten this four-legged snake to death. "Don't be reserved. Grandpa Dragon will wait for you here." The little azure dragon continued to shout. The large Een Soul did not act rashly and said calmly, "I have existed for who knows how many years, and you guys want to trick me into entering into the area where the saint's bone is effective, and use the saint's bone to suppress me? Heh, you guys are really dreaming. Fuck. Even ghosts have intelligence now." The large black dog exclaimed in shock, pretending to be surprised. After several times of teasing, the large Een Soul finally revealed a furious expression. He was the king of this area, and had countless Een Souls under his command. Now, he was actually provoked by a few mere core formation tier and true self tier cultivators, so how could he not be furious? "When I capture you, I will slowly devour your souls. At that time, you will know that death is a kind of release." The great Een Soul said calmly, still very well in control of his emotions. "What do we do? This Een Soul won't fall for it." The large black dog looked towards Ling Han. "It can't be helped. After all, he is not an idiot." Ling Han shrugged, seeing that they were still teasing him. The great Een Soul's killing intent became even stronger. However, Ling Han and the others didn't leave, and the great Een Soul didn't dare to charge over either. The bone of the saint was burning the regulations of the living realm, which had a terrifying destructive power against the Een Souls. Even if it was at the level of sect master, it still didn't dare to approach. With a thought, it suddenly soared up. It had flown off without a trace. "This old bastard is definitely lying in ambush for us in the distance," the large black dog said. Everyone nodded. This was obviously a plan to lure the snake out of its hole, but the problem was, were they going to stay here forever? Unless the saints of the living realm charged over, they would only be able to await death. After all, the corpse of the saint would eventually be burnt to nothing. "Let's wait for 2 days first," Ling Han said. 2 days passed. and there was still no sign of the great Yin Soul. "Let's go," Ling Han said. The primal chaos extreme lightning tower contained the heavenly Tao flames. It could burn even venerate tier elites, so a mere sect master was naturally no problem. Everyone moved out. They did not continue onwards, but rather returned in the original direction. This was the Netherworld, and the great emperor had already sealed a connecting point. Thus, it was impossible to find another connecting point to the living realm. They had to return and wait for the seal to be unlocked. This was the only way out. After they had walked a certain distance, a figure streaked across the skies, and then descended. Wasn't it that sect master great Yin Soul from before? "Now, where can you guys run to?" the large Yin Soul asked calmly. It had deliberately allowed Ling Han and the others to walk very far before charging out. In this way, even if Ling Han and the others had some kind of trump card that could block it for a while, they would definitely not have the time to escape back to where the saint's corpse was. Thus, these living beings were definitely going to die. "It's been too long since I've had a taste of a living soul," this great Yin Soul said, its eye sockets exuding a cold light. Ling Han smiled faintly and said, "Old rascal, I'll give you a chance. Don't seek death. Humph, you living beings. All of you really have very cheap mouths." The great Yin Soul sneered and attacked brazenly. It was sect master level, so what did it have to fear? Sigh. Ling Han sighed. The primal chaos extreme lightning tower was already hovering above his head, and once the tower opened, the heavenly Tao flames instantly gushed out. "What?" The great Yin Soul paled in shock. This was the Netherworld, so where did these living flames come from? Moreover, it was so terrifying. To say nothing of the fact that it was only at the level of the sect master, even venerate tier elites could only turn around and flee. The problem was, it had charged over on its own volition, so could it make it in time to escape? Boom! Like a moth flying into a flame, it took the initiative to throw itself into the raging flames. "Ah!" This Yin Soul screamed tragically, rippling in everyone's minds. "You're reaping what you sow," the large black dog said with a sigh. "Remember to be smarter in your next life," the little azure dragon said. Then, it slapped its paw and said, "Io, you can't even be a ghost anymore. So how can you have a next life?" A slip of the tongue. A slip of the tongue. The large Yin Soul was already being refined in the first place, and hearing the large black dog and the little azure dragon's ridicule, if it was a living being, it would definitely be spurting out blood at this moment. But now it could only wail in grief. After only a while, it was completely burnt by the heavenly Tao flames. A surge of energy surged over. Everyone had absorbed a portion, and the strength of their souls had increased. This was sect master level. As long as there are 30 to 50 Yin Souls of this level, Grandpa Dog's soul would be able to break through to spiritual transformation tier, the large black dog said. "I can only use heavenly Tao flames 3 more times. If a fourth comes, we'll all die," Ling Han said. Moreover, a sect master Yin Soul is as rare as phoenix feathers and unicorn horns. There's only one in each area, so don't count on it. Then should we follow up on our victory and sweep through this den of Yin Souls? The little azure dragon's fighting spirit was overflowing. Ling Han shook his head. "I keep suspecting that this is a higher level Yin Soul that is rearing venerate tier level Yin Souls to feed on. Thus, we had best leave quickly. If we really draw out venerate tier level Yin Souls, even the heavenly Tao flames might not be able to deal with them. Unless the Yin Soul stood there and did not dodge or evade, allowing him to burn it, how could a venerate tier be so easily killed?" They hurried and headed back the way they had come. At this moment, they could clearly feel that there was something off with the atmosphere. The heaven and earth seemed to be filled with oppression, and they had a feeling that a storm was about to come. "Looks like after killing that sect master Yin Soul, we really are going to draw out the great monster behind it. Hurry up and flee." They were already fast enough, and were not far from the bonfire of the first saint's corpse. However, right at this moment, a terrifying aura assaulted them, and a black shadow appeared in the horizon. Even at such a far distance, it still caused their souls to throb. Venerate tier, this was a venerate tier elite. The seal had not been opened, So the Venerate tier elite that had appeared here must be a Een Soul elite. Hiss! Ling Han and the others hurriedly ran for their lives. They could already see the blazing flames burning on the saint's corpse. In order to intimidate this super Een Soul, Ling Han even summoned the Primal Chaos Extreme Lightning Tower, releasing the Heavenly Tao Flames aura. He was sure that with the strength of Venerate tier, he could completely sense it. Boom! A cold wind blew past, and a massive palm slapped over, bringing with it an aura that could sweep aside all matter. Fuck, this Venerate tier level Great Een Soul knew that it could not approach and directly launched a long-distance attack. With such a great distance between them, the might of the attack would definitely decrease greatly, but it could not hold up to the fact that it was Venerate tier level. Even if the might of its attack had decreased to Sect Master tier level, it was still capable of easily swatting Ling Han and the others to death. There was nothing else that could be done. Ling Han could only release the Heavenly Tao Flames again. Boom! Raging flames soared into the skies, and the attack that struck over was naturally incinerated. Run! Ling Han shouted. He beckoned everyone to hurriedly run towards the bonfire of Saint Bone. But it was only a few breaths, and the Heavenly Tao flames that filled the skies had completely dispersed. Another giant hand struck over, and it was still fatal. Fuck! Ling Han cursed internally, and once again summoned the Heavenly Tao flames. This time, he could only use it again. To be honest, Ling Han really didn't want to use it. Something like a trump card was best used for intimidation because once it was used, it would be gone. However, if he only used it as an intimidation tactic, it could be effective for many times. The Heavenly Tao flames soared into the sky, and as expected, dispersed the attack once more. Thankfully, the bonfire of Saint Bone was already right in front of them. Everyone hurriedly quickened their pace. Schwa, they rushed over. Xiao, in the skies, that Venerate tier Een Soul descended. It did not have any facial features, but everyone could clearly sense that they were being observed by it. It was also afraid of the flames burning on the Saint Bone, so it simply stared at them and didn't attack again. Damn guy! Someone cursed softly behind Ling Han and the others. Hey! Who are you insulting? The large black dog was displeased, and he turned around to look. Oh, this place was basically still the group that had first entered, but some people had still left. By now, there were about 7 Imperial Sons here. At least, Ling Han had seen these 7 people before. As for whether there were more, he did not know. What did you guys do to actually draw out such a monster? Su Jie asked coldly, his voice filled with interrogative intent. The large black dog sneered and said, You're nothing but a defeated opponent, yet you still have the face to speak to Grandpa Dog? Su Jie's face instantly flushed red. He very much wanted to refute these words. After all, he hadn't been defeated by a despicable dog. However, Ling Han was smiling at him from the sidelines, causing his desire to refute to instantly die at the tip of his tongue. Thus, even if he said such words, Ling Han only had to add a few more words, and he would still be extremely passive. Thus, it would be better not to say anything. Humph! Resolve your own troubles. Don't involve others. Sure, Yuanjin chided coldly. What do you mean? The little azure dragon was enraged. It should be known that he was the son of the true dragon, and in terms of Imperial second generation, no one's status was higher than his. Heh! Since it's you people who caused this trouble, then please leave this place. The Imperial son, Guan Yuanming, said calmly. Although his tone was calm, his intentions were extremely vicious. That was a Venerate tier level Een Soul. How could Imperial sons like them not see through it? Yet they wanted Ling Han and the others to leave. Wasn't that equivalent to sending them to their deaths? Ling Han and the others were all enraged. Previously, they had already been expelled once, and now they were being expelled again. This was blatantly using someone else to do their dirty work. How depraved. Ling Han showed a cold smirk. You guys really think that this place belongs to you, and you can do whatever you want? Hee, I was only asking you to leave. Why are you so flustered and exasperated? Su Jie asked with a slight smile. At this moment, he naturally felt that everything was under control, and appeared extremely calm. Ling Han laughed loudly. I have a different suggestion. Why don't you guys get lost? Ha ha ha. Those Imperial sons all laughed loudly. This was really a great joke. Though you, Ling Han, are freakish, you are only a core formation tier after all. At most, you would only be slightly stronger than an Imperial son, and furthermore, this was in a special place like the Netherworld. Just how many Imperial sons did they have? There were a total of 9 of them. 9 against 1, just tell me, was there any reason not to win? Ling Han, your journey has been too smooth, so you are too arrogant. Sure, Yuanjin shook his head. However, you will not be so lucky this time. Ling Han cracked a smile. Why do I feel like the heavens are always on my side? Little Han, don't waste your breath on them. Deal with them all. The little azure dragon waved its claws, appearing very impatient. All right. Ling Han nodded. The man and dragon approached the bonfire of Saint Bone, both of them clasping their hands behind their backs, their aura soaring sky-high. The large black dog stroked his beard, appearing to be quite gratified, because this was all taught by him. Ha-ha! You're really courting death. The 9 Imperial sons all walked out. This was a rare good opportunity. As long as Ling Han was forced out of the area of the Saint Bone bonfire, that terrifying Great Een soul would deal with Ling Han for them. Without spilling a single drop of blood, it was an easy and enjoyable experience. Charge! They all leaped, pouncing towards Ling Han and the little azure dragon. How many do you want? The little azure dragon asked Ling Han in a show-off manner. I'll take all of them. Ling Han laughed loudly, and was already the first to speed up, greeting Shi Yuanjin and the others. Fuck! Don't be so greedy, brat. Leave a few for Grandpa Dragon. The little azure dragon hurriedly increased its speed as well. Boom! Ling Han took the lead, already exchanging blows with the 9 Imperial sons for the first time. A terrifying power surged. Though this was the Netherworld and could not stimulate the regulations, the power of the True Self tier was still incredibly terrifying. Moreover, they were all Imperial Sun level, and their battle prowess was even stronger. However, the 9 Imperial sons immediately looked astonished. How was this possible? It was a battle of 9 against 1, so logically speaking, they should have been able to crush Ling Han. However, after battling for a while, they discovered that Ling Han's power was far above theirs. In fact, his power had already reached a crushing level. Moreover, even though the 9 of them had teamed up, they were still no match for Ling Han. It was extremely difficult for them to block his attacks. True Self tier! They exclaimed through gritted teeth. They naturally knew why Ling Han's battle prowess had suddenly surpassed them by so much. This incredibly freakish guy had actually broken through. And now, everyone was battling at the same cultivation level and as Imperial sons, and it was 9 against 1 at that. They were actually still so battered and exhausted. This was practically a slap in the face. Imperial son? Hey! Ling Han was calm and unhurried. In a battle of 1 against 9, he still had the absolute upper hand. At present, his mystical power and body art had both advanced into True Self tier, and his power was as high as 6th heaven. Furthermore, his defense was invincible against Shi Yuanjin and the others. Could not be helped. Who asked that there was no way to draw on the regulations of heaven and earth here? Shi Yuanjin and the others had only grasped the imperial technique, yet were completely unable to use it. The little azure dragon also unleashed its might. Its battle prowess was only slightly inferior to Ling Han's, and it could deal with at least 3 Imperial sons. To the Imperial sons, his participation was equivalent to adding fuel to the fire. In the first place, they were already too busy, and now they were even more unable to deal with the situation. Scram! Ling Han was the first to grab Wuxia. With a toss, he directly threw the latter out of the bonfire of Saint Bone. He would pay them back in the same coin. Ling Han had always been one to distinguish between kindness and hatred. If you treat me well, I will treat you even better, but if you treat me badly, I will repay you 100-fold. They wanted to chase them away? Heh! Scram on your own first. Wuxia was tossed out, and he had already left the area affected by the bone flame of the saint. Instantly, that great Een soul that was standing upright and unmoving immediately moved. Boom, a large hand shot out, blocking out the sun and clouds. This was a Venerate tier-level Great Een Soul, so just how terrifying was its abilities? Pa, with a palm strike, Su Jie was turned into dust. That's not right. When the power of the palm strike dispersed, Su Jie actually appeared again. That's right, substitution seal. As the Imperial Sun, the substitution seal was naturally standard. However, in the Netherworld, the regulations were different, and the substitution seal was also unable to take full effect. There was a trace of blood at the corner of Su Jie's mouth, and his face was as pale as paper. Obviously, though he had escaped this calamity, he had also suffered serious injuries. Heh! Pointless resistance. The large Een Soul attacked again. So what if it was substitution seal? To it was only a matter of 2 more moves. It was extremely easy for a Venerate tier elite to kill a true self tier. Su Jie was extremely furious himself, wanting nothing more than to tear Ling Han into pieces. But in this kind of situation, how could he allow himself to have any further thoughts? Immediately, he took out a 10,000 escape talisman and tore it into shreds. Xiao, his figure flashed, and he immediately disappeared from sight. The effects of the escape talisman would definitely be greatly reduced in this place, but even if he couldn't flee 10,000 miles, he could at least flee 5,000 miles. As long as he found another bonfire of Saint Bone, he would still be able to escape with his life. Ling Han couldn't help but feel like it was a pity. The imperial clans had deep roots, and there seemed to be as many substitution seals and escape talismans as if they were free. However, would this make him give up? Ling Han looked towards Shi Yuanjin and the others. There were only 8 imperial sons left. As his cold eyes swept over them, Shi Yuanjin and the others all felt a chill in their hearts. They had never imagined that not only had Ling Han advanced into true self-tier, his abilities were enough to suppress them. Furthermore, he was so decisive and overbearing that he even dared to kill an imperial son. If it was not for the substitution seal and escape talisman, Su Jie would definitely have died. Are you guys going to scram on your own? Or do you want me to help you? Ling Han asked balefully. He didn't plan to stop here. Shi Yuanjin and the others almost went mad with fury. They were imperial sons, so when had they ever received such treatment before? Ling Han, you have to consider carefully. If you offend us imperial clans, consider if there would still be a place for you in this world. Guan Yuanming shouted loudly. Ling Han shook his head and said, if I have to suppress my temperament just because I'm afraid of the imperial clans, what right do I have to aim for the position of emperor? Hiss! This guy was so arrogant. Fine, you're ruthless, you're ruthless. Shi Yuanjin took out a 10,000-mile escape talisman and slapped it onto his body. He immediately disappeared without a trace. Rather than having others attack him and then be ravaged by the Een Soul, it would be better for him to take the initiative. At least, he would be able to suffer less. Afterwards, Guan Yuanming and the other imperial sons all used escape talismans. Before they left, they all glared angrily at Ling Han, their eyes filled with resentment. Only Ling Han would dare to force the imperial sons to this extent. The others were all looking at Ling Han with stunned expressions, fearing that Ling Han would become aroused from killing and throw them out as well. It should be known that they did not have treasures like the substitution seal or the escape talisman. However, Ling Han was naturally not that kind of person. He sat down in a cross-legged position and began to cultivate the Heavenly Dragon Emperor technique. He had just broken through to this cultivation level, and the upper limit had been lifted, so there was very much room for improvement. The little azure dragon and the others didn't attack again, and they all sat down on the ground. Right now, they could only wait for the saint to come in and resolve the situation. That Venerate tier-level Een Soul was extremely patient, and just stood there without moving. If one wasn't paying attention, one might think that it was a stone statue. And just like that, day after day passed. Suddenly, the whole world seemed to light up for a moment. That was an indescribable feeling. Ling Han immediately discovered that he could sense a sliver of heaven and earth's regulations. Though it was extremely weak, it could indeed be used. It could increase the might of celestial techniques to a certain extent. Could it be? The seal has been unlocked? Ling Han, the little azure dragon, and the large black dog asked at the same time. In their group, they were the only ones who had broken through to the true self tier. The venerate tier-level great Een soul that originally looked like a stone statue suddenly moved. It looked into the distance, and 2 eye sockets appeared on its face. Suddenly, 2 balls of light shot out, as if they could penetrate space. Humph! Audacious Een soul! You dare spy on me? A cold humph directly appeared in everyone's minds. Woo! The great Een soul immediately took a few steps back. Its whole body was trembling, as if it was in an extremely unstable state, and could explode at any moment. It was greatly shocked, and without another word, directly turned around and left. Its speed was extremely fast. However, a large golden hand suddenly stretched over from the distance, and grabbed out at the great Een soul at an even faster speed. This large hand was covered densely with seals that intertwined to form a brilliant light, exuding an incomparable aura, as if the heavens had moved. A saint. The large Een soul tried its best to break free, yet it was completely unable to struggle free. Even though there was only a gap of a major tier between the venerate tier and the saint tier, this barrier was like an insurmountable gulf. Die! The saint's voice rang out again. This great Een soul was forcibly crushed. Instantly, energy surged towards Ling Han and the others like a wave. Even if Ling Han's physique was astonishing, he still managed to absorb some of it. Instantly, his soul felt extremely comfortable. The others received more benefits than he did. The one who had died was a venerate tier elite, and for everyone this was extremely nutritious. Instantly, it was as if everyone was drunk, their faces completely flushed red. A figure appeared. He was close to 3 meters tall, his black skin disheveled, possessing an indescribable dominance. It's Eternity Sea Saint. Many people recognized this saint, and they immediately fell to their knees to pay their respects. The Eternity Sea Saint was a new saint that had risen up more than 200,000 years ago, and had founded the Eternity Sea Holy Land. He was presently in his prime and was in the limelight. Even if he went to the imperial clans, he would still be able to become a respected guest. The Eternity Sea Saint merely nodded calmly. With his status, even in the face of the imperial clans, there was absolutely no need for him to restrain his temper. At his height, he was already capable of ignoring everything else. This place is actually the Netherworld, he said in a low voice. So the Holy Emperor suppressed an entrance to the Netherworld. Hihi. This day has finally come. A voice rang out slowly, lingering in everyone's hearts. Though these were only very ordinary words, everyone felt an endless chill rise up from the bottom of their hearts, and the temperature dropped drastically in an instant. Een Saint. The Eternity Sea Saint's expression became serious. My name is Iron River. The voice continued. Friend, your appearance is not bad. Can you lend it to me to use? The Eternity Sea Saint chuckled coldly and said, To become a Een Saint, you were most likely a saint yourself. However, when a person dies, his Tao is destroyed, so it's only natural that you let go of your obsessions. It's about time that you step on the path of rebirth. The Iron River Een Saint cackled and said, Who doesn't cherish their life? Moreover, we're all cultivators, and we've carefully and conscientiously cultivated for countless years. Isn't it all for the sake of achieving immortality? To say nothing of me, even Wu came to an abrupt stop, as if it had touched some taboo. Iron River, get out here, the Eternity Sea Saint shouted. I'll expiate you today. Haha, this is the Netherworld, and you can't use the regulations of the living realm. How could I be afraid of you? As his words fell, a slender figure appeared. Was this really a Een soul? He looked benevolent, with a head of white hair, white brows, and a white beard. He really did not have the slightest bit of Een soul aura. After becoming a saint, would even a Een soul's temperament undergo a massive change? I shall deliver you from purgatory. The Eternity Sea Saint charged out. The two saints battled. One represented the strongest of the living realm, while the other was the strongest of the netherworld. Neither of them dared to hold back. Thus, the shock waves from their attacks were boundlessly terrifying. Thankfully, this saint's corpse could even disperse the aftermath of an attack, and that was why everyone had not been implicated by the aftermath in this battle between saints. Boom! As soon as the two saints exchanged blows, they were astounded. Their bodies enlarged, and they were both tens of thousands of meters tall. They were indomitable and were boundlessly terrifying. Taking advantage of this opportunity, "Leave quickly," Ling Han shouted lightly. A saint had entered the arena, which meant that the seal had already been opened. If they did not leave now, when would they be able to leave? Everyone hurriedly broke into a run. Now, in order to save their lives, they really had to use all their strength. Wang, another terrifying aura assaulted, sinister to the bone. Ling Han turned around as he ran, and saw that another person had joined the battle between the two saints. Together with the Iron River Een Saint, they were attacking the Eternity Sea Saint. Obviously, this was another Een Saint. Ling Han felt apprehensive. He had not guessed wrongly. There had always been great elites from the netherworld paying attention to this place, while at the same time, they were also nurturing weak Een souls. Whether it was nurturing to become subordinates, or to become food, they were strengthening their abilities, and waiting for an opportunity to attack the living realm. More importantly, just how many saints were there in the netherworld? At present, there were no emperor in this world, and saints were the deciding power. It was useless to think about this now. He was too weak, and had no right to interfere in the matters of saint-level power at all. Even if he used the heavenly Tao flames, it would be useless. Not long after, they had already ran back to where they had entered. They saw that this place had initially been empty, but now there was another passage, but at the end was a stretch of primal chaos. Obviously, the two realms were already connected. Let's go! There was nothing to hesitate about. Now that even saint-level power had appeared, minor characters like them would only be turned into ashes if they tried to forcefully approach. Everyone entered into the passage, and the severe cold immediately began to subside. When they walked out of the passage, they saw that there was a massive stone door behind them, but previously, there was only a hole and now it was completely open. They had returned to the living realm. There was a powerful being standing guard here, seated like a stone statue, but after everyone came out, he opened his eyes. Instantly, an indescribable aura surged, indescribably terrifying. This was a saint. "Show your spatial spirit tool." "I want to examine it," the saint said calmly. As mentioned before, everyone could enter, and whatever they obtained could be kept to themselves. However, if they obtained the secret of the Needless Mountains, they would have to share it with others. They had already made an agreement, so who would dare to disobey the words of a saint? Everyone took out their spatial spirit tools, not daring to hide anything. Ling Han was also very generous. The Primal Chaos Extreme Lightning Tower was his personal spirit tool. It had been forged with a sliver of his spiritual power, so it could be stored into his mind. So he was completely unafraid of exposing the secret of the imperial weapon. There was naturally no need to mention the insight of a saint. He did not need to touch it with his bare hands at all. With a sweep of his eyes, the contents of the spatial spirit tool would be exposed. Thus, the speed of his inspection was also extremely fast. Everyone filed out, and there was practically no need for them to stop. When Ling Han walked past, the saint suddenly moved, and took the tortoise shell from him. However, this saint also couldn't find anything special about it after observing for a short while. Thus, he casually handed it back to Ling Han. For some reason, Ling Han breathed a sigh of relief, as if he was unwilling to lose this thing. He himself was also very curious. Could it be that this was really a treasure? The amazing thing about this tortoise shell was that it could not be stored into a spatial spirit tool. But what was the use of this kind of amazing thing? They exited the cave. This was extremely difficult because this cave was practically perpendicular. The gravity field at the bottom could be considered terrifying, so the difficulty of climbing up could be imagined. Ling Han, on the other hand, was unconcerned. He allowed his two beautiful wives to hug him while he climbed up easily. In a short while, he had already climbed out. "Ling Han, let's play again." Hunyo was unsatisfied. After arriving here, Ling Han discovered that the regulations of heaven and earth had suddenly become rich and colorful. This was the true living realm. In the mountain sea heaven, regulations solidified and was too helpful in comprehending Tao. In a mere instant, Ling Han discovered that enlightenment had arisen, causing him to involuntarily sit down and begin cultivating. Couldn't be helped. He had just broken through to the true self tier, yet in the environment of the netherworld, he could only be considered a pseudo-true self tier. Now that he had returned to the living realm, and under the enlightenment, he had truly stepped through the doors of the true self tier. "Don't disturb him," the Empress rebuked Hunyo. Hunyo stuck out her tongue. "Fierce woman, there will come a day when I will suppress you." The Empress heard this, yet her expression was filled with pride. She couldn't even be bothered to pay her any regard. The large black dog and little azure dragon were also in desperate need of comprehending Tao again to stabilize their cultivation level. Otherwise, it was extremely likely that they would encounter a situation wherein their cultivation level would regress. Once this kind of situation occurred, it would cause great damage to their Tao foundations. In future, it would be difficult for them to climb to the peak of martial arts. They all went into seclusion, while the Empress and Hunyo stayed behind to accompany Ling Han. He needed someone to protect him. Couldn't be helped. Who asked him to suddenly gain enlightenment? This kind of good opportunity couldn't be obtained even if others begged, so he naturally couldn't be interrupted. Thankfully, when the large black dog went to inform the Nine Mountains Venerate, this great elite immediately rushed over and personally stood guard for Ling Han. Though they were not master and disciple, their relationship was superior to who knew how many masters and disciples. With the protection of a Venerate tier elite, the Empress and Hunyo were naturally at ease. He comprehended Tao for 3 days and 3 nights. Ling Han's comprehensions continued. His spiritual power overflowed, continuously extracting the regulations of heaven and earth. In his mind, the clay body became more and more majestic, and multiple seals appeared on his body, indescribably mysterious. The true self of destruction was completely formed. He opened his eyes with a xiao, and a smile appeared on his face. In this one period of seclusion, his power had actually increased by 1 heaven. Just 3 days. It was really worth it. If he could comprehend a few more times, he would soon be able to cross over into the early stage of the true self tier. Haha, your improvement is very fast. The Nine Mountains Venerate nodded, his heart filled with joy. This disciple of his would always surprise him. Ling Han also smiled. "Thank you for guarding me, old man." The Nine Mountains Venerate waved his hand and said, "Let's return to base camp. I also want to go to the netherworld to see what's going on." "All right." Ling Han nodded and returned to base camp. For the moment, the battle in the netherworld was still relatively stable. A considerable number of saints had entered into the netherworld, and added with a large number of Venerate tier elites, they were completely capable of suppressing the situation. Meanwhile, the younger generation that had entered the netherworld had mostly withdrawn as well. By now, it was already a clash of elites, and even elites like Sect Master would find it very difficult to interfere. If the younger generation joined in on the excitement, that would completely be courting death. Ling Han cultivated madly every day. The regulations here were within easy reach, and for a true self-tier cultivator, this was the best place to cultivate. Furthermore, there was a time limit for the mountain sea heaven to stay open. After this, there would be no such place, so he naturally had to hurry. Moreover, once the seal was unsealed, what if even saints couldn't suppress it? Then when large amounts of souls rushed out, who would still dare to stay here? Thus, every extra day he could stay here was due to good luck. He had to hurry. After reaching the true self tier, Ling Han was finally able to systematically organize the celestial techniques that he had learned. This cultivation level was a dividing line. The distance between Imperial Technique, Saint Technique, and Venerate Tier Technique would suddenly increase, and the gap was not just a little bit. Ling Han tested them one by one. He discovered that the Imperial Technique could increase his battle prowess by 7 heavens. 7 heavens! This was extremely shocking, because the 4 minor levels of the true self tier cultivation level represented the difference of 3 heavens in battle prowess. This imperial technique could actually increase one's battle prowess by 7 heavens, directly leaping over 2 minor levels of the true self tier. This was too exaggerated. Ling Han asked Qi Menghan for guidance, and discovered that this was still not the true might of the imperial technique, because the imperial technique could increase one's battle prowess by 9 heavens, at most. But why had Ling Han's battle prowess only increased by 7 heavens? Was it because he was not talented enough, and had not grasped the essence of the imperial technique? No, this was because he had not learnt the corresponding imperial scroll. The imperial technique could only be activated with the imperial scroll to unleash its full might. Furthermore, different imperial techniques had to be matched with the corresponding imperial scroll. Otherwise, there would not be any effect either. Thus, the imperial scroll was the true trump card of an imperial clan. It was as important as the imperial weapon. Ling Han went to recultivate the saint techniques again, and discovered that the might of the saint techniques could increase his battle prowess by about 6 heavens. And, compared to the imperial technique, it was indeed much too inferior. Looking again at the venerate tier technique, it could only increase battle prowess by 3 heavens. For sect master, it was 2 heavens, 1 heaven for spirit transformation tier, and as for the true self tier, it was completely unable to increase battle prowess, so it could only maintain its standard. As for the precious technique of core formation tier, what true self-tier cultivator would use a cultivation technique on the level of core formation tier? In the case of high-level energies, the increase was in destructive power. This could not be directly displayed with the number of heavens. However, if the battle prowess of 2 people were equal, but the high-level energies used were different, the higher-level energy would definitely be the victor. The peaceful days didn't last for many days before the imperial clan members came to seek Ling Han out for an accounting. To actually expel the imperial sons into the hands of Ain Soul, this was an act of treason against the living realm. The 9 imperial clans had joined forces, demanding that the 9 sons' holy land hand over Ling Han. The 9 sons' holy land was very strong, but faced with a colossal being like the imperial clan, even one clan would be hard-pressed, what more 9 clans? They were completely no match. It was not advisable to use force, as it would only lead to severe injury. Not only would it not be able to protect Ling Han, the 9 sons' holy land would also be buried with him. What could they do? The 2 venerate tier elites who planned to cultivate in seclusion here discussed for a while, and decided to negotiate with the imperial clans while sending Ling Han away. At that time, they would clap their hands and just exclaim, "What?" They didn't know where Ling Han had gone. No matter how awesome your imperial clan is, you can't destroy a holy land for no reason, right? This kind of thing had indeed happened in history, but with the birth of a new emperor, this kind of unruly imperial clan would also be severely punished. The imperial clan was domineering, but they also had to abide by the bottom line, and could not cross that line. Qi Menghan went all out. She was going to ask a saint of her clan to personally send Ling Han off. Boom! The entire mountain sea heaven shook violently, as if the heaven and earth was about to collapse. What was going on here? Everyone was alarmed. Even those who had cultivated in seclusion could no longer sit still, and ran out one after another. Multiple figures shot out of the cave that led to the netherworld. There were great elites from the living realm, as well as elites from the netherworld. However, for a great elite of the netherworld to appear here, what did this mean? The great elites of the living realm could no longer defend, and that was why the netherworld elites had launched a counterattack. In just an instant, one after another, ghosts flew out of the cave entrance. They were like locusts passing through, densely packed and filling the sky. Ain Soul didn't have a physical body, so it naturally wouldn't be affected by gravity. A great battle was inevitable. Retreat! The 9 mountains venerate flew back. There are actually as many as 37 Ain saints in the netherworld. In terms of numbers, they have completely overwhelmed the living realm. Without mobilizing the imperial weapon, we would not be able to suppress them at all. However, the imperial clans didn't bring an imperial weapon this time, and there's a severe shortage of saints in the living realm. It'll take some time to call for reinforcements. We can't stay here any longer. Retreat immediately. One after another, the forces began to retreat. Under such circumstances, There was naturally no force that could bother to make trouble for Ling Han. The most important thing now was to save their lives. Debts and whatnot could be set aside for later. Endless Een souls wreaked havoc. Led by the Een saints, they were unstoppable. For Een souls, living souls were the best tonic, and they also needed to borrow the bodies of living beings to be able to walk in the mortal world. Otherwise, the heaven and earth of the living realm would cause massive damage to them. This was similar to how living beings would be affected by the coldness of the netherworld when they entered the netherworld. Een souls were the same when they entered the living realm. However, they would be burned by yang qi and would be incinerated into ashes if they weren't careful. The Nine Mountains Venerate was already aware that Ling Han had offended the 9 great imperial clan, so he couldn't help but feel a headache coming on. He knew that this disciple of his was capable of causing trouble, and he knew that not only was this guy on the must-kill list of the Battle God Palace, which even the imperial clans had a headache over, he had even gone in for a stroll and learnt the secret technique of the Battle God Palace that would not be taught to outsiders. However, offending the 9 great imperial clans in one go was also a little scary. Come to think of it, those imperial sons had bullied Ling Han like this, and even if it was the 9 Mountains Venerate, he wouldn't be able to tolerate it. Fuck, wasn't Ling Han's life worth anything? I'll immediately send you to the West Heavenly Realm. You keep a low profile and grow. As long as you become a saint, you'll have nothing to fear, and when you become an emperor, ho-ho. The 9 Mountains Venerate was filled with confidence in Ling Han. It was a sure bet that this disciple of his would become a saint, and there was also a high chance that he would become an emperor. Ling Han nodded in understanding. When he had chased the 9 imperial sons out of the bonfire of Saint Bone, he had already prepared himself to flee. Regret? Not at all. He had never been the type to swallow his anger. Furthermore, if he could swallow this anger, his martial intent that was advancing bravely would also be affected, leaving behind a powerful setback. When he attempted to break through to the saint path and become an emperor, it could possibly cause a destructive blow. His Tao was destined that he could not compromise in matters of principle. After some discussion, the large black dog and little azure dragon decided to leave with Ling Han. As for Hu Niu and the Empress, they would continue to cultivate in the 9 Suns' holy land. With the 9 Mountains Venerate's help, the imperial clans couldn't go too far either. Ling Han, the large black dog, and the little azure dragon were all filled with anger. The 9 great imperial clans. Just you wait. Ling Han didn't immediately head to the West Heavenly Realm. Instead, he went to the celestial sea planet first. There was the final test left behind by the ancient sun saint here. As long as one could pass this test, they would be able to obtain all of the inheritances of the saint. Led by the 9 Mountains Venerate, they soon arrived at the celestial sea planet. Ling Han made a trip and easily passed the test, finally obtaining all the inheritances of the saint. The complete ancient sun divine scroll, a large amount of cultivation resources, as well as 4 saint techniques. After Ling Han memorized the cultivation technique, he asked the 9 Mountains Venerate to bring these items back to the 9 Suns' holy land and hand them over to the Empress, Hu Niu, and Lin Luo. He needed to arm the people by his side so that they could mature as soon as possible. In future, when they faced off against the imperial clans, these would be the main troops. This was especially the case for Lin Luo, Zhou Heng, and the others. They had formed a friendship through the arduous battles in the Genesis world, and they had more so fused the 9 cauldrons into one without relying on external power. They had hopes of becoming emperors. Similarly, he also allocated a large amount of cultivation resources for the 9 Mountains Venerate to bring back. If those former 7th-tier heavenly venerates of the Genesis world could all mature, they would become an astonishing force. Then, the 9 Mountains Venerate tore a rip into space and brought Ling Han, the little azure dragon and the large black dog with him, arriving at the West Heavenly Realm. He reminded Ling Han to be careful, then returned to 9 Suns' holy land. "Little Han, let's go," the large black dog said. "Grandpa Dragon is really angered this time. When Grandpa Dragon becomes a saint, I'll definitely beat up those bastards." The little azure dragon was also extremely furious. Ling Han nodded in understanding. He definitely couldn't swallow this humiliation. Moreover, This could transform into boundless motivation that would help him grow even faster. If he became a saint, those imperial clans would have to be careful. The three of them kept a very low profile, changing their appearance slightly. In any case, they had the soul-forming technique, and as long as one was not saint level, it was practically impossible to see through their disguises. Not too many days later, a big piece of news spread out on the Galaxy network. The saints of the imperial clans brought the imperial weapons and finally suppressed the Een souls. However, what followed was a burst of Een souls, and more saint-level Een souls appeared as if there was no end to them. That's right. Een saints were not as strong as saints of the living realm, especially when they were battling in the living realm, but this advantage in numbers was really astonishing. It was no wonder that when Celestial Sea Planet had a saint on standby, he could only die together in the end, using himself to mend the heavens, sealing off the passageway of the two realms. The individual battle prowess of Een souls was not strong, but taking into account their advantage in numbers, it was too terrifying. When the number of Een saints had exceeded 1,000, even the imperial clans would not be able to hold on. The imperial weapons couldn't be used indefinitely, and even though they had killed many Een saints, even more had appeared. The imperial clans had no choice but to retreat, giving up the strategic location of the Mountain Sea Heaven. However, right at this moment, the Mountain Sea Heaven suddenly closed. The Emperor tear-killing formation channeled, killing all the Een saints that couldn't escape back to the netherworld. Hiss! When the news spread out, it shook the world. The descending heaven-holy emperor was truly omnipotent. His schemes from who knew how many years ago had shown their might, and they had actually still been effective. He had tricked and killed several hundred Een saints in a single stroke. Even if there were a great many saints in the netherworld, this should still cause them great damage. However, the passageway to the netherworld had already opened, so this great emperor-killing formation probably wouldn't be able to stop the netherworld for too long. Perhaps in a few dozen years or a few hundred years, the netherworld would reorganize themselves and launch another strong invasion. At that time, the living realm would have to face a huge test. Ling Han merely sighed and set this great matter aside. He was presently only a true self-tier, so what was the point of worrying? Little Han, what are we going to do first? The large black dog asked. Ling Han thought for a moment, then said, I first want to cultivate formations, reaching the point where I can set up transfer formations at will. In that way, no matter how big the world is, we can still do as we please. The large black dog and little azure dragon both nodded. At present, Ling Han had grasped the star steps, but he could only travel freely on a planet, but could not traverse the galaxy. Thus, if he took another step further, their life-saving ability would be greatly increased. To Ling Han, this wasn't a difficult task. After all, he had already succeeded once when he rescued Song Lan. Now, he only needed to strengthen this ability. They arrived at a planet. Ling Han first communicated with the ley lines, and after he gained a strong ability to protect himself, he settled down here and began to focus on studying formations. In the following period of time, Ling Han's life was considerably ordinary. However, he also paid attention to the Nine Suns Holy Land situation on the Galaxy network. As expected, after the problem of the Mountain Sea Heaven was temporarily resolved, the 9 great imperial clans all had the time, and began to demand the Nine Suns Holy Land turn Ling Han over. The Nine Suns Holy Land was quite magnanimous. They opened the mountain gates and allowed the various imperial clans to search. As long as they found Ling Han, they could take him away. This matter was still left unresolved. After all, the Nine Suns Holy Land did not offend the imperial clans. You, the imperial clans, can look down on the Holy Land, but if you speak of destroying a holy land for no reason, then you have to be careful that the ancestral king would come in future to rake up old debts. It was not as if there had never been imperial clans that had disappeared in history. However, the Nine Suns Holy Land could be let off the hook, but Ling Han had made it onto the Galaxy Network's wanted persons list. The 9 great imperial clans issued a bounty at the same time. Anyone who could provide information on Ling Han's whereabouts and thus apprehend Ling Han would receive a favor from the imperial clans. This was astonishing. Being able to obtain a favor from the imperial clan was equivalent to obtaining a life-saving golden medallion. Who dared to offend them? Thus, the entire universe was in an uproar. Everyone was searching for Ling Han's whereabouts. Ling Han didn't take this to heart. He had already changed his appearance and soul fluctuation, so the only thing that could expose his whereabouts was the Galaxy Network connection device. Who knew if the so-called Just Chong clan would secretly make a move? After all, the Galaxy Network was created by their clan. Thus, Ling Han disposed of the connection device, and so had the large black dog and little azure dragon. They would rather buy it again when they needed it, as it was not expensive anyways. When one had reached the level of the true self tier, one would have to cultivate mystical power, and the importance of spiritual power would rise to another level. How could a clay fetus advance in the direction of a stone fetus? He would use his spiritual power to strengthen it, improve it, and complete the qualitative transformation. The True Self tier chapter of the Nine Suns Divine Scroll was mainly about cultivating spiritual power. The stronger the spiritual power, the stronger the high-level energy that could be extracted and stimulated from the regulations of heaven and earth. Ling Han had already cultivated the true self of destruction, so he could begin the next step. Using the primal chaos divine lightning as a foundation, he created a second true self. This was slow. He would need to truly grasp the primal chaos divine lightning, and only then would he be able to form the true self on this basis. Otherwise, the true self would crumble the moment it was formed, and there was absolutely no way it could be formed. After Ling Han entered into a deep level of seclusion, this time, if he did not succeed, he would not be coming out of seclusion. Time passed slowly, and in the blink of an eye 1.5 years had passed. Ling Han's eyes suddenly snapped open. He had finally successfully grasped the preliminary structure of the primal chaos divine lightning, and could begin the next step. He extracted the regulations of the primal chaos divine lightning, and used this as the skeleton. Then he used the amazing waters of the alchemy pool as the blood and flesh, filling in this true self. It didn't collapse. Success. Ling Han sighed with emotion. The higher one's cultivation level, the harder it was to cultivate. After a whole 1.5 years, he finally managed to build the primal chaos divine lightning true self clay fetus, and this was only the early stage of the true self tier. There were still 7 clay fetuses to build, which showed how difficult it was. Even if everything was normal, it would take over a dozen years to complete the cultivation of the early stage of the true self tier. It was really a long time. Without the support of top-notch resources, cultivation is really too difficult. Ling Han shook his head, and even the Holy Lands could only pour this kind of resources into one person. The Imperial clan would be slightly more awesome, and could nurture a few people at the same time. This could be seen from the number of Imperial sons. If I was still in the Nine Suns Holy Land, I would definitely be able to get the natural treasures from time to time, but now, even if the Nine Suns Holy Land wants to give me something, I will not accept it. I have to completely sever my relations with them, to avoid implicating them. Although the 9 great Imperial clans have retreated, they will definitely send people to keep an eye on the Nine Suns Holy Land and search for traces of me. If I have contact with the Nine Suns Holy Land, then the Nine Suns Holy Land will really be unable to remove from this matter. Infiltrate the other Holy Lands? Ling Han's eyes lit up. He didn't need to fully display his freakish abilities, but even if he could only unleash 50% of his abilities, that would be enough to sweep aside all other Dao Child cultivators. It would be very easy for him to seize the position of Dao Child. However, how could a Holy Land easily accept a Dao Child? Wouldn't they have to investigate his history all the way back to his ancestors from 3 generations ago? Let's go out for a walk first. Ling Han walked out with his hands clasped behind his back. He had cultivated in seclusion for a whole 1.5 years, so he also needed to adjust his emotions. This was a farmland, and everyone was working in the fields. They would work at dawn and rest at sunset, their lives ordinary and fulfilling. There were mountains in the distance, but they weren't tall. They were covered with verdant pine trees that spread out in stretches. Ling Han strolled into the mountains. With a thought, he walked up the mountain. He didn't activate his movement technique, and he simply continued to walk forward, one step after another. The principles of heaven and earth would sometimes be hidden within the ordinary. He had obtained the memories of Panshur Ancestral King, and this great emperor was a rock that had attained Tao. In his previous life, he could be considered as extremely ordinary, yet he had walked out a supreme path and the whole world revered him. Ling Han suddenly heard a sound, and turned around to see an old man cutting wood. It was the axe that had struck the trunk of the tree, creating a very loud sound. This was an ordinary old man, but his body was very strong. He was dressed in coarse hemp clothing, and his hands were covered with calluses. His joints were protruding, and it was obvious that he was used to doing manual labor. However, Ling Han only glanced at it a few times, yet he was deeply engrossed in it. The rhythm of this old man brandishing the axe was very rhythmic. He clearly hadn't used much power, but when he delivered a strike, he controlled this point very well, just enough to completely release the power without wasting the slightest bit. Moreover, with a swing of the axe and using the elasticity of the tree trunk, he only needed to exert a little force, and he would be able to rebound the axe back, which would save more power. This was intelligence formed through countless years of logging. What Ling Han was deeply embroiled in was naturally not this technique of cutting trees, but rather that he had unconsciously thought of battle. He was the strongest elite of Genesis world, but after arriving in this great world, his previous battle techniques could no longer be used, because the philosophy and method of battle were completely different. Now that he was attracted by the old man's action of cutting trees, he unknowingly connected the two types of battles. He walked over, and said with a smile, "Uncle, can I help you chop for a while?" The old man stopped, and the breath he exhaled turned into a white mist. It was still quite cold in this season, but because of his work, his whole person seemed to have been fished out of a steamer. He was exuding steam. "Can you do it?" he asked with a smile. "Let's give it a try." Ling Han nodded. "All right." The old man handed the axe over. Ling Han brandished the axe. Shwa, the axe slashed out, as fast as lightning. A large tree was instantly severed, and fell loudly onto the ground. The old man revealed an astounded expression, and said, "Young man, how strong do you have to be?" Meanwhile, Ling Han felt awkward. He hadn't used his mystical power, yet he was still a body arts cultivator. With a wave of his hand, he naturally unleashed his power. Even if it was just a wisp, how difficult would it be to sever an ordinary tree? He smiled at the old man, and began to cut again. He was mainly experiencing that smooth and natural feeling, and felt that it was very inspirational, and his ultimate goal was to create his own technique. Every ancestral king would create a technique that belonged to them. It was not after they had achieved Tao, but rather before that. On the other hand, the path of achieving Tao was the process of them perfecting their own techniques. Now, Ling Han had already stepped onto the true self tier, and began to cultivate the regulations of heaven and earth. Then, he would be qualified to create his own technique. Of course, this was not something that could be accomplished overnight, and that was why he needed to comprehend it. His movements became smoother and smoother. He only needed to use the smallest amount of power, and he would be able to show the best effects. The old man was resting at the side. At first, he was unconcerned, but as he watched, his eyes gradually lit up. Unfortunately, Ling Han was completely focused and did not notice this fact. Half a day later, there was no longer a large tree that was still standing in this mountain range. Ling Han finally stopped. He returned the axe to the elder and said, "Uncle, I'll help you drag these trees home." "No need." The old man shook his head. "I have already been cutting trees here for 100 years, experiencing life, yet I was accidentally interrupted by you, brat. There is no meaning to continue staying here." Ling Han gritted his teeth. Judging by the old man's tone, he had subconsciously called over someone. But could it be that he had encountered a great elite cultivating in seclusion? That was because he could not tell the strength of this old man at all. He should be an extremely ordinary person, but precisely because of this, if this old man was really a cultivator, his abilities would definitely be world-shaking, and only then would he be able to deceive his eyes. Encountering each other is fate. "Sir, do you have any fated opportunity to bestow on this junior?" Ling Han immediately asked. In any case, he was thick-skinned enough, so he definitely couldn't miss such a good opportunity. The elder faltered upon hearing this. He hadn't imagined that Ling Han would dare to ask him for a great opportunity. Even with his temperament that had been cultivated for tens of thousands of years, he was still astonished. Then he burst into laughter. If I were tens of thousands of years old, perhaps I would want to take you as my disciple. Such high comprehension ability is really rare. He sighed ruefully. With his insight, he naturally could tell that Ling Han was just about to walk out a path that belonged solely to him. Unfortunately, I've long since become indifferent, so I won't delay a young man like you. Go on. If we're fated to meet again, we'll naturally meet again. After saying this, the elder casually tore a rip into space. He then took a step forward, instantly vanishing from sight. Fuck! Tearing open a rip into space with his bare hands. This was at least an elite of the sect master level. However, Ling Han had dealt with the 9 mountains Venerate for so long, so he was naturally quite familiar with Venerate tiers. Thus, he was certain that even a Venerate tier wouldn't be able to hide his aura in front of him. Saint, that old man was a saint. Ling Han couldn't help but sigh in grief. He had seen a saint and he had actually failed to obtain any benefits. This was really too much of a pity. Strange, why didn't I go to other places and insist on coming here? Furthermore, why do I have to choose this planet? Ling Han murmured. Could it be that this is the effect of fortune? He had obtained the true dragon of fortune, and when he made his choice, he would lean towards the side that was beneficial to him. Thus, he had come to this planet by accident, and by accident had come to the mountains where he encountered a saint. Sigh. Looks like my luck is still not good enough. Ling Han continued to walk. Because he hadn't connected to the galaxy network yet, he didn't know what had happened recently either. Thus, he went to buy a connection device and returned to find the little azure dragon and the large black dog. He wanted to connect to the galaxy network to take a look. Thus, he had to first call over the little azure dragon and the large black dog. He didn't want to suddenly attract powerful enemies and unconsciously betray the two of them. Ling Han had never been one to screw over his teammates. Ling Han connected to the galaxy network, and all the major events that had happened in the past year, as well as matters related to him, were all listed. Firstly, after over a year of cooling down, Ling Han's popularity had already decreased. No one mentioned his freakishness anymore because he was targeted by the 9 great imperial clans. In truth, it was more than that. It was just that the 9 great imperial clans had flipped out previously. Who would still have a bright future ahead of them? Ling Han was done for. Offending the imperial clans, no matter how they thought about it, it would only lead to death. Of course, there were still a great many people searching for the whereabouts of Ling Han. The bounty issued by the imperial clans had not been withdrawn. As long as they discovered Ling Han because of the information that someone had provided, they could still win a favor from the imperial clans. Thus, Ling Han had now become a rat that everyone despised. This caused Ling Han, little azure dragon, and the large black dog to explode in fury. They clearly hadn't done anything wrong, and everything was only for self-protection. Why did those who were being victimized have to hide here and there? Could not be helped. Everything was due to strength. The imperial clans had a saint in their ranks, and they also had an imperial weapon to intimidate the world. Thus, they could act with such force. Motherfucker! These bastards! The large black dog cursed. Thankfully, the 9 Suns Holy Land had completely drawn a clear dividing line between them and Ling Han, and even announced that Ling Han would be expelled from the Holy Land. In this way, the 9 great imperial clans would have nothing else to say, or use this as a reason to make trouble for the 9 Suns Holy Land. Ling Han naturally wouldn't blame the 9 Suns Holy Land. In truth, he was the only one who owed the 9 Suns Holy Land. Little Han, Grandpa Dog can't take this lying down, the large black dog said. Grandpa Dragon can't tolerate it either, the little azure dragon also said. Ling Han nodded. However, we can only remember this now, and grow in a low-key manner. When we become venerates and saints, we will definitely make these imperial clans pay the price. Where are we going now? The large black dog asked. Ling Han revealed a smile and said, I just found out on the Galaxy Network that West Heavenly Realms Buddhist race is recruiting prodigies. They want to pick one of them to be Buddha-san. The large black dog immediately jumped up. You want to become this Buddha-san? Why not? Ling Han shrugged. Though Buddhist race West Heavenly Realm is only a branch, this is still slightly stronger than Holy Lands. Thus, if I can become the Buddha-san, I would definitely be able to obtain adequate cultivation resources. The large black dog's expression was strange, and he said, the Buddha-son of West Heavenly Realm, Shi Yongming, was killed by you, brat. You actually have the face to be a Buddha-son. How shameless. Hee. But Grandpa Dog likes it. These imperial clans were all overbearing and domineering. If they could take advantage of this opportunity to trick them, they could at least vent some of their anger. Many planets have Buddhist temples. We only need to go to one of them and show a considerable amount of talent, and we would be sent to the headquarters of the West Heavenly Realm, Ling Han said. Us. The large black dog bared his teeth. Grandpa Dog doesn't want to become a monk. Grandpa Dragon doesn't want to either. I haven't left a descendant yet. The little azure dragon also said hurriedly. Fuck. Who said that the Buddhist race are all monks? That's only a branch of the Buddhist race, and they're called ascetic monks. The majority of Buddhist race are like us, and there is no taboo on marriage or carnal pleasures, Ling Han said. Sigh. Then I'll reluctantly accept. The little azure dragon and the large black dog both nodded. Ling Han set up the transfer formation on his own. After the formation was activated, they instantly traversed the galaxy and arrived at Baihong Planet. This was not too far away from the planet they had previously been on. Could not be helped. The resources in Ling Han's possession only allowed him to set up this kind of transfer formation. If it was too far away, it could not be maintained and would explode midway. Then Ling Han and the others would fall out of the void. They could appear in the vast universe, or they could be at the center of some planet. As for the Galaxy Network connection device, he had naturally thrown it away long ago. It was impossible that he would still keep it by his side. The divine temple of the Buddhist race was located on the Baihong planet, and just like the Chang clan, the bases of the Buddhist race were practically scattered throughout the whole universe. In terms of scale alone, they could be regarded as the twin heroes of the universe alongside the Chang clan. Ling Han was presently disguised as an elegant young man, while the little azure dragon was an extremely beautiful green-haired little boy of about 5 or 6 years old. However, once he opened his mouth, his image was immediately ruined. As for the large black dog, he transformed into a middle-aged man with a perverted expression. In this way, the three of them arrived at the divine temple of a city. The Buddhist race was most skilled in spiritual attacks. Thus, they had a way of dealing with souls, a way of dealing with internal demons, and a way of moving people's hearts. There were a great many devout believers here. With every step they took, they would kneel and walk up the long staircase towards the divine temple that was located at a higher place. Ling Han and the others appeared especially out of place. They strode forward, and the believers glared at them as they did so, as if they had sullied their sacredness. These steps were really long. Clearly, they were meant to show off the loftiness of the divine temple, so that the believers would feel even more reverence. Ling Han and the others didn't walk too fast either. After a few minutes, they finally arrived in front of the divine temple. Do the three of you want to burn incense and pay respects to Buddha? A young monk walked out to receive them. The large black dog immediately said, I'm here to apply for the position of Buddha-san. The young monk gave an "oh" and said, Everyone, this way please. He went to ask for help from an older monk, who was responsible for communicating with Ling Han and the others. Being a Buddha-san isn't something that you people can become just because you want to, the old monk said. The lowest requirement is true self-tier. And if your aptitude is truly excellent, then we can also slightly lower our standards. Core formation tier would also be acceptable. Ling Han smiled and said, The three of us meet the requirements. We're all true self-tiers. When these words fell, the old monk instantly looked reverent, because he was only a cauldron forging tier. Please wait for a moment. I will go and seek help from Lord Chief Monk. The old monk also ran off. This was a relatively barren planet, so the overall level of cultivation wasn't high. Even the chief monk of the Divine Temple was only a true self-tier cultivator. He naturally could tell the cultivation levels of Ling Han and the others. After being stunned for a while, he immediately contacted his superiors to inform them about Ling Han and the others. Hehe, 3 benefactors, you guys are really fated with Buddha, the chief monk said. Today is the deadline for recruiting Buddha sons. If you guys come a day later, you won't be able to participate in the selection. Ling Han chuckled. My luck has always been good. Under the arrangements of this chief monk, they once again stepped onto the transfer formation and arrived at the Green Bird Planet. The Green Bird Planet was a great planet in this galaxy. Its overall level of cultivation was far superior to Bai Hong Planet, and the Divine Temple here was also a level higher. All those who had been selected in this galaxy would be tested here. The Buddhist race was a force of ancestral king tier level. Their inheritance had been passed down for who knew how many generations, and their strength was undoubted. Thus, there were really a lot of people who came to register. This was only a small galaxy. It was said that in other galaxies, even the Tao Child of a Holy Land would participate in the selection. The Tao Child of the Holy Land was also accepted. Weren't they afraid that he would flee after learning their techniques? Of course not. Because the Buddhist race was most proficient in moving people's hearts, and brainwashing was their strongest skill. Who cares if you are a Tao child or whatnot? Even if the Imperial Sun was here, they would still be able to make you convert to Buddhism, and never have any second thoughts. Thus, the Buddhist race recruited people with ease, and definitely did not care about background or whatnot. That was because in this place, anyone who had a black reputation could clear their name, and anyone with a clear reputation could also be slandered. It was precisely because of this that Ling Han had chosen to come here. He was not afraid of others investigating his background. After all, their identities were all false. Woo, little Han, this milk tea is really not bad. The large black dog held a teacup, and was currently drinking very happily. Furious rhinoceros milk added with Mingyue tea, and when combined, it becomes milk tea. The little azure dragon was also drinking enthusiastically. Ling Han sighed and said, Forget about the 4-legged snake. He's still a kid. Your face is already covered with stubble. Yet you're still drinking milk. Milk tea, not milk. The large black dog emphasized. Come, you too. The little azure dragon ordered another cup of milk tea and forced it onto Ling Han. Fine then. The 3 of them held milk tea in their hands, and waited in the plaza of the Divine Temple. There were at least several hundred people standing here, and they were all very young, but all of them were exuding a powerful aura. They were either in the true self tier or the core formation tier. The lowest requirement for selecting Buddha sons this time was the true self tier, but if a core formation tier had high aptitude, they could also be accepted as an exception. Thus, there were a great many core formation tier cultivators here, who thought that their aptitude was shocking enough, and had reached the extent of being accepted as an exception. Haha! With me, Yuan Dong here. All of you can leave, someone shouted. Hehe. I know who you are, Yuan Dong. To actually have the courage to say such words, I really feel ashamed for you. Immediately, someone continued, his face filled with a cold smirk. Hiss Nailan K. That person who called himself Yuan Dong exclaimed in shock, and fell silent. There really were a few prodigies here. After introducing themselves, they immediately caused a commotion. Che, all of you are just weaklings. Once I appear, all of you have to stand aside. The little azure dragon couldn't help but mock. He really had a bad mouth. He was now a beautiful little boy of about 5 or 6 years old, yet he was acting all mature and experienced. His mouth was spitting venom, and everyone couldn't help but click their tongues in amazement. Hee. Which family does this child come from? Why don't the adults of the family control him? Someone said with a laugh. They thought that the little azure dragon had only come with the others, and definitely couldn't be a contestant. What is it? Unconvinced. The large black dog immediately glared at him. So arrogant. The Yuan Dong from before immediately jumped out. He could be considered an elite here, and only a few people had abilities superior to him. What is it? Unconvinced. The large black dog immediately slanted a sideways glare at him. You really are defiant. Yuan Dong leaped towards the large black dog and shot out a palm strike, the force behind it extraordinarily strong. The large black dog scoffed and waved his palm in reply. Boom! The two of them clashed in close-quarter combat, and Yuan Dong's proud face instantly revealed an expression of shock. They were both in the early stage of the true self tier, yet his power was actually much weaker than his opponent's. In a short while he was sent flying. Yuan Dong humphed and suppressed his shock. To a true self-tier cultivator, power was only a part of battle prowess, and its weight had already declined greatly, and the use of regulations of the heaven and earth was the true way to go. Your power is strong, but that does not mean that your use of the regulations of heaven and earth is stronger than mine. He charged out again and communicated with the regulations of heaven and earth. He delivered another palm strike. Boom! The celestial technique showed its might. With the regulations entwined around it, its might increased greatly. Tisk! You're showing off in front of me. The large black dog shot out a foot. Pong! Yuan Dong was once again sent flying. He was completely outmatched. One had to realize that the large black dog was a 9 cauldrons fusion cauldron. When he had been at the core formation tier, he had also fused with the regulations of 9-9-star energy. Even without channeling the saint technique, his battle prowess was at least at the 5th heaven. This naturally was a one-sided suppression. Seeing how Yuan Dong was dealt with so easily, everyone was greatly shocked, and the limited few that were stronger than Yuan Dong also frowned deeply. This large man looked vulgar, but his abilities were really no joke. Oi, 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 what's with your gazes? The large black dog was enraged. It was enough for them to show reverence in their eyes, so why was there a hint of disdain? Dare I ask how I should address you, sir? Nayland K spoke up. He was one of the strongest elites here. The large black dog turned around to look, and an idea came to him. He said, We're the 3 milk tea brothers. Pooh! Ling Han immediately spluttered. Fuck! I'll give you another chance, so you'd better say it again. Yet the large black dog was very pleased with himself, seeming to be very satisfied with this name. I am the eldest, this is the second eldest, and this is the third. He pointed first at Ling Han, and then at the little azure dragon. Ling Han's expression became even darker. He detested the title of second place. However, everyone was very reverent. No matter how unreliable the name of 3 milk tea brothers was, strength represented everything. The large black dog was indeed very strong. Hee. Sorry for the long wait, benefactors. A baldy walked over. He was wearing a bright yellow monastic robe, and the word Buddha was embroidered on the back, exuding a powerful aura. Treasure! The large black dog stared at the monastic robe, his eyes shining. If there's a chance, we'll snatch it. The little azure dragon also said. These two guys, could it be that this was all they could do? Ling Han shook his head. This was really worrisome. Please come with me. The baldy brought them into the hall. There was a very large rock placed here. A testing stone? Ling Han mumbled softly. As expected, to take disciples, the first step was naturally to test natural talent, which was enough to eliminate 99% of people. This is a precious stone used to test natural talent. You guys can't use weapons like spirit tool, talisman weapons, and so on, but you can channel any kind of precious technique to attack it. Your battle prowess will appear in the form of pillars of light. Only those who have reached 5 or more will be qualified to enter the next round, and go to the headquarters of the West Heavenly Realm and participate in the further selection, the baldy said. Only 5. Someone immediately laughed loudly, and was the first to walk out. Let me give it a try. He was filled with confidence, and thought that blasting out 5 pillars of light would be a piece of cake. That person stepped forwards and delivered an attack, but in the end, only a mere 3 pillars of light lit up. What? That person did not dare believe it, and hurriedly said, This is not my true strength. Let me try again. The baldy smiled. Everyone has 3 chances. That person didn't dare to be careless anymore. and hurriedly concentrated on preparing. Then he shot out another attack. The regulations surged, turning into a dazzling light. Pong, under this attack, there were still only 3 pillars of light flickering. That person was stupefied. This was his full power attack, but still only 3 pillars of light lit up. Then, even if he exceeded his limits in the next attack, he would only be able to fire out 4 pillars of light at most. Benefactor, are you going to give up the chance for the final attack? The Baldy asked. That person thought for a moment, then nodded, and said, I give up. This was really too far away. He did not have the slightest bit of confidence. However, he did not leave immediately. He wanted to see if there was anyone here that could shoot out 5 pillars of light. Next, everyone stepped forward to test themselves, one after another, but even the person with the best natural talent only shot out 4 pillars of light, and not one of them could pass. In the end, only Ling Han and the other 2 remained. The 3 milk tea brothers. Quite a number of people whispered. Could these 3 people perform a miracle? Let's go. It's our turn to show off. The large black dog was the first to walk out. It arrived in front of the testing stone and delivered a palm strike. Instantly, 5 pillars of light rose up. Hiss! Instantly, a commotion arose. Finally, someone blasted out 5 pillars of light. Impressive. The Baldy's face was also filled with joy. The seeds of the Buddha Sun had appeared here, and they too had contributed, so they would be rewarded. The large black dog delivered another palm strike. Schwa! 6 pillars of light flashed in unison. Fuck! Everyone's eyes widened. 6 flashes of light, he had actually attained 6 flashes of light. Heavens, the strongest among them had only just barely shot out 4 flashes of light, but this vulgar large man had actually shot out 6 flashes of light. Just how astonishing was the gap between them. The large black dog was extremely pleased with himself. This was the result that he wanted. Just as it was about to deliver another strike, blasting out 7 pillars of light, it saw Ling Han shake his head slightly at it. He couldn't show off too much. The large black dog withdrew his hand and walked back in an extremely arrogant manner. However, no one spoke up to rebuke him. Instead, they were filled with respect and reverence. In this world, as long as you had the strength to be arrogant, you could be as arrogant as you liked. Others would only revere you. I'm coming. The little azure dragon jumped out. What, this child was going to be tested as well. Everyone was curious. Previously, they had all thought that the little azure dragon was only brought over by Ling Han and the large black dog for fun. They had not thought that this little boy was actually one of the examinees. Pong! The little azure dragon threw a punch, and instantly, 6 pillars of light lit up. Holy fuck! Everyone almost fainted in unison. The moment the little azure dragon attacked, they could all tell that it was a genuine true self tier. Furthermore, the 6 pillars of light were even more terrifying. Heavens, such a small true self tier cultivator. His natural talent was shocking. What kind of monster was this? The Baldy was even happier. 2 seeds. This time, their divine temple had really done a great service. The little azure dragon was vexed. He planned to start from 3 pillars of light, then 5 pillars of light, and then 6 pillars of light. In this way, there would be both a turnaround and a climax. However, if he accidentally used too much force, he had directly blasted out 6 pillars of light. He didn't attack again. He kept a low profile. They had to keep a low profile now. After the little azure dragon walked back, Ling Han walked over and threw a light punch without accumulating any power. 3 flashes of light. I've been too careful, Ling Han thought to himself. Everyone shook their heads. Looks like the second eldest of the 3 milk tea brothers was not that strong. It can't be helped. He is second eldest, so he definitely is weak. Someone made a sarcastic remark, feeling that if one of the 3 brothers was eliminated, he would feel slightly better. Ha ha! A great many people laughed loudly. Meanwhile, the little azure dragon lamented. This was how he wanted to show off. He wanted to first make others look down on him, and then slap them with the harsh reality. Only then would he make them drop their jaws in shock. Only then would he be perfect. There was still a considerable distance between him and Ling Han on the path of showing off. Ling Han threw another punch. Pong! At this moment, 5 pillars of light lit up at the same time. Fuck! Seeing this scene, everyone couldn't help but blurt out. As it turned out, it was not that this guy's natural talent was inferior, but rather that he was deliberately showing off. Otherwise, how could it be possible that he would produce another 2 pillars of light in the next strike? Meanwhile, Ling Han felt that this was just right. It was enough for him to pass, and there was no need for him to show off too much. Ha ha! The Baldy was all smiles. A total of 3 people had passed this time, and this was a great merit. The others were all sent away, and Ling Han and the others stayed behind. They needed to rest for a while. In a few days, they would be sent to the headquarters of the Buddhist race in the West Heavenly Realm, where they would undergo the final selection. Time passed very quickly. In just 5 days, Ling Han and the others once again entered into the transformation, heading towards the headquarters of the Buddhist race in the West Heavenly Realm. That was on the Stainless planet. Originally, the name of this planet was not this, but because the Buddhist race of the West Heavenly Realm established their headquarters here, they renamed this planet. Accompanying Ling Han and the others was an old monk. He was responsible for bringing Ling Han and the others to the headquarters of the Buddhist race to complete the handover ceremony. The 3 milk tea brothers? When he heard the old monk recite the nicknames of Ling Han and the others with a solemn expression, the person in charge of registration had a strange expression on his face. He glanced at the little azure dragon. If they were all this kind of kids, then the name of 3 milk tea brothers would still fit the situation, but there was also a vulgar man and a young lad. This made him want to splutter in shock, especially when this old monk had a serious expression on his face, which created a strong contrast. After completing the registration, the old monk returned, and Ling Han and the others stayed here. When the seeds from the various galaxies had all been sent over, the selection would begin. For days later, all the seeds had arrived. The Stainless planet was the headquarters of the West Heavenly Realms Buddha tribe. Divine temples were everywhere here, where the ancestral Buddha was worshipped. The incense was flourishing, and Ling Han and the others were summoned into a divine temple by a man with black hair that reached his waist. "My name is Xianxia," the man said. He paused, then continued, "Only when one has truly gained approval would he be able to bear the surname of Shi." Everyone nodded in agreement. This was the surname of the ancestral Buddha. "Why is the selection this time at least true self-tier?" Xianxia explained. "That is because the imperial sons of this generation have all advanced into true self-tier. In order to compete with these imperial sons, we no longer have the time to nurture them from the very beginning. So that was the case. If one's natural talent was outstanding enough, they could still relax to the level of the core formation tier. After all, the core formation tier was only 1 cultivation level away, so there was still hope of catching up. No matter which great clan's heir you were previously, or the Tao child of a great sect, now that you're here, you're all just ordinary members." Xianxia continued, "In Buddhism, fate matters, so if you're not fated enough, you won't be able to stay here. From today onwards, the elimination will begin. There are a total of 307 of you. In this first round, only 18 people can win." All of a sudden, everyone exclaimed in shock. This elimination rate was really too high, wasn't it? But upon further thought, there could only be 1 Buddha son, so this was actually very normal. How were they going to be eliminated? Of course, it wasn't a battle, because there were indeed core formation tiers that were outstandingly talented. If it was a battle, it would obviously be unfair to them. Xianxia crossed his arms behind his back and said, "I will now teach you a venerate tier-level celestial technique. The first 18 people who have successfully cultivated it can stay behind, and as for the others, they will all be eliminated." He didn't give them any time to rest. Instead, he started to act. "This is Kasayapa Finger." As he explained the details of this celestial technique, he cast the regulations of heaven and earth. He could only describe its form, but could not outline its spirit. A celestial technique of this level could only be comprehended by oneself. Shi Changtian only performed it once, then had everyone comprehend and learn. He sat down in a cross-legged position on the sidelines and had someone demonstrate in front of him after they had successfully cultivated it. He was the judge. Everyone's eyes were wide open just now, capturing Shi Changtian's every move, and had also taken note of his commentary. How to communicate with the regulations of heaven and earth was the true focus. At this moment, a dead silence fell. Ling Han and the others naturally began to cultivate as well. If they were to be eliminated in the first stage, that would really be funny. Cassiopeia finger, a venerate tier-level technique. Even in a holy land, this should be considered an ultimate technique, but in this place it was actually used as a test. Even if one was eliminated, he would at least be able to learn a venerate tier-level technique, which was a great profit. Of course, Ling Han and the others were completely unconcerned. The saint techniques they possessed had already exceeded 10 in number, so a venerate tier-level technique was naturally not worthy of their notice. In just a single day, Ling Han had already comprehended the profound secrets of the Cassiopeia finger. However, he didn't stand up immediately. Instead, he chose to wait. Another half-day passed, and Xiao, the little azure dragon, stood up. "I've learnt it," he said, leaping out and practicing in front of Shi Changtian. Meanwhile, the Tao of heaven and earth was stimulated and entwined around his body. He tapped out a finger, which turned into a beam of light. Pooh! It hit the wall and immediately blasted out a hole. The beam of light continued to shoot out, as if it would never stop. Shi Changtian smiled. "Not bad, not bad. You have passed." The little azure dragon winked at Ling Han, meaning, "How about it? You can't compare to Grandpa Dragon, right?" Ling Han simply smiled. He wasn't such a showy person. Another half-day passed, and the large black dog also successfully cultivated the Cassiopeia finger. It was ranked second. Then, another day later, the others succeeded one after another. Ling Han waited until the 15th place to start practicing, and naturally passed the test smoothly. In a total of 5 days, 18 seeds appeared, and the others were all eliminated. Next, it's still the elimination battles. Shi Changtian said, "The rules are the same. I'll teach you a celestial technique. You guys can comprehend it on your own. The top 15 win, and 3 are eliminated. However, those who have been eliminated can choose to stay in Buddhist race and not become Buddha sons. Becoming something like guardian deities is also a good choice." Without giving them too much time to think, Shi Changtian performed another new celestial technique, called Heavenly Net Kick. This was also a venerate tier-level technique, but it was slightly more difficult than the Cassiopeia finger. However, for Ling Han, this still couldn't be considered a dilemma. In just one day, he had already mastered this leg technique. Just like before, he did not immediately stand up. Instead, he chose to keep a low profile. In the end, the little azure dragon was once again showy, and was the first to pass, followed by the large black dog. Ling Han waited until the 12th place to finally step forward and obtain a spot. Yet Shi Changtian took a second look at him, because Ling Han had not passed the first stage easily. He should be ranked last in the second stage, and it was even normal for Ling Han to be eliminated. However, Ling Han was actually ranked 12th, which he felt was very unexpected. 7 days later, this round of eliminations ended. The third round of elimination was also the same. However, the precious technique was changed to Thousand Flower Fists, and the top 3 remained unchanged. It was still the little azure dragon that was first, the large black dog that was second, and the third was a man called Fuquan. He was the Tao child of a holy land, so his natural talent was naturally extraordinary. Although he was always in the top 3, Fuquan's expression didn't look too good. He, the Tao child of the holy land, was actually inferior to 2 unknown guys. These 2 people looked undependable at first glance. One was a child, while the other was vulgar. Being suppressed by these 2 people, Fuquan felt very sullen. This time, Ling Han was ranked 9th, causing Shi Changtian to be shocked again. This test method was getting harder and harder, so why was your ranking getting higher and higher? Show off. Shi Changtian immediately came to a conclusion and looked strangely at Ling Han. If Ling Han found out, he would definitely be very depressed. He really only wanted to keep a low profile. After 3 rounds of testing, there were now 9 people left from the original 18. Next, it's time to learn Dharma. Xianxia brought them to another divine temple. There were a great many monks chanting here, releasing a majestic voice that instantly cleared one's mind, as if they had seen the ancestral Buddha. Ling Han discovered that this chant was extremely rhythmic, secretly matching the rhythm of heavenly Tao. He understood in his heart that this should be a cultivation technique similar to the 6 characters Bright King Curse, but the effects were much worse. Furthermore, it could not expel evil and brighten one's heart. Instead, it could bewitch one's heart and give rise to endless admiration for the ancestral Buddha. If there was only one person chanting, then with the willpower of the prodigies here, they would definitely be able to resist. However, with at least several hundred monks chanting together, the effects would be huge. He hurriedly transmitted a message to the little azure dragon and the large black dog through divine sense, telling the 2 people not to be careless. They were here to scam cultivation resources, not to really join the Buddhist race. In the side hall, an eminent monk came over and gave them a lecture on Dharma. This was an arhat. In the Buddhist tribe, saints were called Buddhas, venerators were called Bodhisattva, and sect masters were called arhats. Thus, this was a great elite of the minor advanced tier. He spoke eloquently, reciting scriptures, inspiring faith in others. Ling Han kept his guard up, and sensitively discovered that this was actually brainwashing them, instilling the concept of loyalty to the Buddhist race. Unlike the Battle God Palace, which used cruel slaughter to numb one's senses, right until one's self-destruction, the Buddhist race was much more brilliant. All of them were soul cultivator elites, and were also most skilled in influencing the soul. It had only been a few days, and everyone's expressions had changed. They were filled with reverence towards the ancestral Buddha. That was a kind of worship that originated from the depths of their hearts. Ling Han was secretly astonished, but he didn't show it. He secretly used the 6 characters Bright King Curse to alert himself, the little azure dragon and the large black dog. This enlightenment could dispel all negative effects. It was a little ironic. The 6 characters Bright King Curse was originally the Buddhist race's imperial technique, but now it was used by Ling Han to resist the Buddhist Dharma. Another 7 days later, that arhat finished his sermon and left swiftly. Xianxia appeared and said calmly, "Follow me. The elimination continues. From here onwards, only one person would be eliminated each time, but the test was no longer just limited to cultivating the celestial technique. Instead, it was also a test of battle prowess. After all, the Buddha Son could not possibly stay at home all the time. 2 months passed, and the 9 people became 4 people. Aside from Ling Han and the other 2, the last person was Fuquan. Little Han, something has happened. Someone has come from the Buddhist land of the 33 heavens. The Buddhist race's true headquarters was not in this universe, but rather a small space that the ancestral Buddha had created through supreme means. It had become the holy land of the Buddhist race and was called Buddhist land. Where was the Buddhist land? It was only known that it was the 33 heavens, and all other information was missing. It was as mysterious as the Battle God Palace. Among the west, east, north, and south heavenly realms, there were headquarters of the Buddhist race. They were responsible for promoting the teachings of the Buddhist race and nurturing their believers. In the millions and millions of years, they had progressed in an organized manner, and there was indeed an increasing number of Buddhist race believers. However, the Buddhist land had always been mysterious. Since there were representatives in the 4 great heavenly realms, they had never appeared, as if the existence of the Buddhist land was only a myth. But now, someone had come from the Buddhist land? Oh! Ling Han was very intrigued. Who is it? A guy called Shi Yongyun. He's young, but he's extremely arrogant, the large black dog said. Ling Han smiled faintly. As long as it does not affect us, who cares so much about them? That's true. We are here to con cultivation resources, not to clean up their mess. The large black dog nodded, and did not take it to heart either. They did not take it to heart, but not too many days later, The flames brought by Shi Yongyun had already reached them. On this day, Ling Han and the other seeds were all cultivating together, but an uninvited guest appeared. Haha! Since I am here, what need is there for me to select outsiders as Buddha's son? Ling Han and the others all opened their eyes and looked towards that person. This was a young man, dressed in white monk robes, exuding an otherworldly air. Shi Yongyun, the large black dog said to Ling Han and the little azure dragon through divine sense. Ling Han nodded in understanding. By the looks of it, they didn't want to cause any trouble. However, others wanted to cause trouble for them. Yongyun, watch your words, Shi Changtian said calmly. Shi Yongyun laughed loudly and swept a glance over Shi Changtian, his smile gradually disappearing. What need is there to be cautious here? I have come from the Buddhist land and have the right roots. Before I was even born, I have already faithfully worshipped the ancestral Buddha. So what are these trash worth? This is a matter of our West heavenly realm, and there is no need for you to interfere, Shi Changtian humphed. However, while he clearly was an elite of spirit transformation tier, he was still very tolerant towards Shi Yongyun, who was only in true self tier. Born in the Buddhist land, was he naturally superior to others? Shi Yongyun shook his head. Though the Buddhist cloud resides deep within the 33 heavens, it does not mean that we would not interfere, and just sit by and watch as you sub-branches lead the Buddhist race astray, and their development is getting worse and worse. Rubbish! Shi Changtian finally couldn't bear it any longer. The Buddhist race of the four great heavenly realms could be said to be thriving, so how could this brat be allowed to make slanderous claims? He stood up furiously, glaring furiously at Shi Yongyun. The aura of spirit transformation tier circulated, making him seem as if he had turned into an angry guardian deity, filled with intimidation. Yet Shi Yongyun was completely unafraid. With a wave of his hand, shwa, a ray of light shot towards Shi Changtian. This naturally could not possibly be an attack. No matter how arrogant Shi Yongyun was, he would not take the initiative to attack a spiritual transformation tier cultivator. This was a suicidal action. This is Great Cloud's Bodhisattva's Buddhist decree. Take a look for yourself, Shi Yongyun said, a smile on his face, looking like he had everything under control. Shi Changtian forcibly suppressed the fury in his heart and unfolded the Buddhist decree. His expression involuntarily darkened. This was indeed Great Cloud's Bodhisattva's decree. He was extremely dissatisfied with the matter of the Buddha son of the West heavenly realm getting killed, and thought that this was a great humiliation to the Buddhist race. He commanded that the Buddhist race of the West heavenly realm find the murderer as soon as possible and deliver punishment. Additionally, he strongly recommended Shi Yongyun as the candidate to succeed the position of Buddha's son. Shi Changtian knew that this Shi Yongyun was Great Cloud's Bodhisattva's lay family, so it was not strange for him to write such a Buddhist decree that was filled with partiality. However, the dignified Bodhisattva actually did not sever his 7 emotions. The Buddhist race of the West heavenly realm naturally had Bodhisattva as well, but when one came from the Buddhist land, they naturally were superior to others. Who dared to ignore the Buddhist decree of the Great Cloud's Bodhisattva? I will not make things difficult for you either. Whether it is competing for the position of Buddha's son or fighting with other imperial sons in future, there is only one word for it: true strength. Shi Yongyun declared proudly. Today, I will use strength to convince others. The large black dog approached and asked, Isn't true strength 2 words? Ling Han shrugged and said, Is there something wrong with his brain? And that's about it. The large black dog nodded. Hey! Don't whisper behind Grandpa Dragon's back. The little azure dragon protested in displeasure. Shi Yongyun's eyes swept over them, and he smirked coldly. The 2 of you are whispering among yourselves. Do you have some kind of grudge against me? I don't have a grudge. I'm very displeased. Fu Quan was the first to stand up. Very good. I like those who have objections, Shi Yongyun said calmly. However, after I suppress you, you naturally won't have any objections or dissatisfaction. All right, after listening to you brag for so long, I am indeed very expectant. Just how strong are you? Fu Quan was not the slightest bit afraid. Shi Yongyun clasped his hands behind his back and walked towards Fu Quan. "Let's battle in the sky," Fu Quan said. "If they battled here, the shockwaves would cause huge damage. There is no need to go to so much trouble. It is only a matter of 2 or 3 moves." Shi Yongyun did not stop in his tracks. "How arrogant!" Fu Quan was angered. "Just how much are you looking down on me?" He cast a look at Shi Changtian, but Shi Changtian did not express anything, as if he had tacitly allowed it to happen. The Buddhist land was the holy land in the hearts of the Buddhist race. This was an inherent advantage. Furthermore, Shi Yongyun had the Buddhist decree of a bodhisattva on him, so Shi Changtian could not control him at all. At the very least, he would have to ask for instructions from a bodhisattva. "Come," Shi Yongyun stated calmly. Fu Quan humphed, leaped out, and charged towards Shi Yongyun. In the first place, he was the Tao child of a holy land, and usually he would be the target of all kinds of flattery, so how could he tolerate such a lofty attitude from Shi Yongyun? "So what if you came from the Buddhist land? I'll beat you into submission." "Humph, this kind of trash is worthy of competing for the position of Buddha son. I really don't know where he got his courage from." Shi Yongyun shot out a palm strike, which turned into a giant golden palm. Buddhist chants could be heard in the air. He was clearly fighting for his own benefit, yet actually gave off the feeling of expiating evil. Boom! Fu Quan instantly spat out a mouthful of blood as he stumbled back. "Can't even withstand a single blow?" Shi Yongyun said disdainfully. "If such a person was really allowed to become the Buddha son, wouldn't the whole world laugh at our Buddhist race for having no one capable?" Fu Quan merely coughed up blood, his face alternating between red and white, yet he was unable to refute these words. His skills were inferior, so no matter what he said, he would only be embarrassing himself further. However, what he had not foreseen was that as the Tao child of the Holy Land, it was one thing for him to be no match for the imperial son. But why couldn't he even defeat any random member of the Buddhist race? Furthermore, the gap was so wide. Shi Changtian also frowned slightly. Though the Buddhist race of the 4 heavenly realms was also known as the Buddhist race, everyone knew that the true inheritance lay in the Buddhist land. Fu Quan had lost, so he could only depend on the other 3. He hoped that they could at least withstand a few blows and not lose too badly. Only then would he be able to ask Bodhisattva for help. Otherwise, he would definitely be harshly scolded. Who's next? Shi Yongyun's eyes swept over Ling Han and the others, bearing a strong disdain. "Little brat, let me spar with you," the large black dog said as he walked over. Shi Yongyun's expression darkened. They could argue, but what was the meaning of your dirty words? If this kind of person was really allowed to become the Buddha son, then the Buddhist race would be completely humiliated. "Humph! Who do you think you are?" He did not immediately flip out. Coming from the Buddhist land, he had too high an opinion of himself, and thought that unless it was the imperial son, there was no way he could match him. He had always had a lofty feeling of pride. In his eyes, defeating Ling Han and his group was naturally a piece of cake, and there was nothing for him to be proud of. The reason why he had not defeated them in one go was only because he wanted to show off a bit. After all, there was nowhere for him to show off in the Buddhist land. It was rare for him to have such an opportunity, so he naturally could not miss it. The large black dog was amused. He pointed at himself with one hand and said, "I'm the leader of the 3 milk tea brothers. You can just call me boss." "Boss your head one." Shi Yongyun's expression darkened further. "Fuck. You dare take advantage of me? You are really outrageously bold, to dare to make fun of even me," he said balefully. "So what if I'm making fun of you? Eat shit," the large black dog shouted. Shi Yongyun finally couldn't bear it any longer. With a loud roar, he charged towards the large black dog. Boom! The power in his entire body overflowed, forming a Buddha halo behind his head. It was flickering with golden light and was filled with a feeling of holiness. However, from the looks of it, his face was filled with malevolence and killing intent. Wasn't this damaging his image? Wrong. The Buddhist race's explanation for this was to transform into a furious guardian deity, subduing evils and eliminating demons. Shi Yongyun still sent out a palm strike, which turned into a giant golden palm, regulations entwined around it, blooming with multiple seals. The large black dog was unafraid and brazenly charged forwards. Hong! 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 The two of them exchanged blows, both unleashing their full battle prowess. True self-tears could control the regulations of heaven and earth. This kind of battle was both a battle of power and also the use of regulations. Multiple divine chains of order appeared, and the two of them turned them into weapons, attacking each other. Shi Changtian couldn't help but widen his eyes, revealing an expression of disbelief. As he saw it, though the large black dog's natural talent in martial arts was still all right, he was too vulgar. He was really not cut out to be a Buddha-son. If it was not for the fact that the selection of Buddha-son did not specifically stipulate the issue of image, he would definitely be the first to eliminate the large black dog. But now, the large black dog had given him a pleasant surprise. He was actually fighting Shi Yongyun to a stalemate, showing his powerful strength. It should be known that Shi Yongyun was in the middle stage of the true self tier, and what about the large black dog? He was in the early stage of the true self tier. The large black dog was still able to fight to this extent even though he was disadvantaged by a minor level. This was a clear sign of the large black dog's natural talent in cultivation. However, there was still a gap of a minor level between the large black dog and Shi Yongyun after all. As the battle continued, he was already being suppressed by Shi Yongyun. Furthermore, the disadvantage was becoming greater and greater, so he had no choice but to leap back and escape from the battle. The victor hasn't been decided yet, so why are you fleeing? Shi Yongyun asked menacingly, a vicious glint in his eyes. He was already filled with killing intent, and wanted to take this opportunity to kill the large black dog. However, this vulgar middle-aged man was so cunning that he actually didn't want to fight him head-on. Decided your sister. The large black dog gave him a middle finger and said, you're at the middle stage of the true self tier, and I'm only at the early stage. What's the point of fighting? Why don't you lower your own cultivation level? I won't mind beating the shit out of you. Fuck. The corner of Shi Yongyun's mouth twitched. Just how much did this perverted middle-aged man have no bottom line, that he would dare to say anything? Come. Second, you go. The large black dog nudged Ling Han. Second, second, second. Ling Han's expression darkened. This damn old blackie, why did he have to give them a combination name? Furthermore, he was second. 3 milk tea brothers? Shi Yongyun murmured. He naturally remembered the large black dog saying that the large black dog was the eldest of the 3 milk tea brothers. Then, this guy who was called the second was naturally one of them. You are this person's second eldest? He looked towards Ling Han. Ling Han was instantly enraged. Xiao, he rushed out, brandishing his fists in a punch. You're the fucking second. Pong! This punch was too fast, and Shi Yongyun was completely unable to block it. Instantly, he sustained a heavy blow, and his whole person slid backwards. He was both shocked and pained. This punch was really too fast, wasn't it? However, right at this moment, Ling Han leaped up high and threw another punch. Pong! He hurriedly crossed his arms over his chest, blocking in front of him. A terrifying power surged over, and he retreated continuously. Shi Yongyun was shocked. This guy was obviously only in the early stage of the true self tier, just like the vulgar middle-aged man, but why was his power so strong to this extent? Moreover, he was also dissatisfied. What right did you have to be so furious, brat? He was the one who was being beaten. I didn't say wrongly. Could it be that you're not his second? Seeing him touch on a sore spot, Ling Han was naturally even more enraged. Boom! 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 He brandished his fists in fury. His power was as high as 8th heaven, and added with the boost from the Saint technique, his battle prowess was as high as 14 heavens. Where was Shi Yongyun? Although he was at the middle stage of the true self tier, his power was only at the 7th heaven. Even if he also used the Saint technique, his top battle prowess was only 13 heavens. Moreover, the Saint technique could increase battle prowess by 6 heavens. This was the limit. The prerequisite was that one had to completely grasp the saint technique. Shi Yongyun did not have such high natural talent. He would only occasionally reach the battle prowess of 13 heavens. Most of the time, he could only blast out battle prowess of 12 heavens. This suppression was fine for Fu Quan, and it was fine for him to defeat the large black dog. But against Ling Han, this was not enough. Pong! 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 He could only be beaten. His face and body were repeatedly hit by fists, and he was in an extremely miserable state. Meanwhile, the large black dog was amused. Up until now, Shi Yongyun still did not know how he had angered Ling Han. He deserved to be beaten. This was normal. He had come from the Buddhist land, so who would use the word second as a curse word? Ha ha ha! The little azure dragon also burst into laughter. Although Fu Quan felt like his anger was vented, he also felt dejected. As it turned out, the 3 milk tea brothers were so fierce. Moreover, it seemed like they would become stronger the younger they were. So this little boy who hadn't made a move yet should be the most terrifying. Thankfully, though he had previously looked down on the 3 milk tea brothers, he did not say it out loud. Otherwise, if they wanted to settle accounts with him, he would be in deep trouble. However, if the 3 milk tea brothers were already so strong, would he still have a chance at becoming Buddha-san? Shi Changtian was also secretly pleased as he watched. Though he could suppress Shi Yongyun single-handedly, due to his status, it was not convenient for him to make a move. After all, he was an envoy that had come from the Buddhist land, but Ling Han was different. Both sides were competing for the position of Buddha-san. So wasn't a fight very normal? Second, your whole family is second. Ling Han grabbed onto Shi Yongyun's wrist and tossed him madly like he was a punching bag. Pong, pong, pong. Though the ground of this great hall had been strengthened by elites, it could not hold up to Ling Han's barrage of blows. The ground on either side of him caved in. Where was Shi Yongyun? He had already been knocked unconscious. He wasn't a body arts practitioner, so his physique could only be considered normal. Enough! At this moment, Shi Changtian finally spoke up to stop him. After suffering such a great defeat, Shi Yongyun naturally could not bring himself to stay any longer. He left the stainless planet as if he was fleeing from something. Judging by the way that Brat looked at you before he left, it's clear that he's harboring a grudge against you. He's waiting for an opportunity to exact revenge, the large black dog said. Ling Han smiled faintly. We are about to become the Buddha-son of West Heavenly Realm. By then, this Shi Yongyun can only come at us head-on. So what do we have to fear? True. The large black dog nodded and relaxed. Oh, that's right. Which one of us is the Buddha-son? The little azure dragon approached. Now that Fu Quan has retreated on his own, only the 3 of us are left. This Buddha-son is definitely one of us. But who's going to be the one? Grandpa Dog will do it. The large black dog was completely shameless. Grandpa Dog is the boss. Boss your sister. Ling Han and the little azure dragon each sent the large black dog flying with a kick. But to be honest, the chances of old black becoming a Buddha-son is not very high, Ling Han said seriously. It's not that your natural talent is bad, but rather your image TSK, tisk, pay. Grandpa Dog can't be more noble and virtuous. The large black dog was unconvinced. Why did people always say that he was vulgar? And they must be jealous of it. That must be the case. 4-legged snake. Looks like we're going to settle this with a single battle, Ling Han said. Do you think I'm afraid of you? The little azure dragon said haughtily. They weren't the only ones considering this problem. The higher-ups of the Buddhist race of West Heavenly Realm were also doing the same. After multiple rounds of selection, the 3 milk tea brothers had already emerged victorious. However, there could only be one Buddha-son, so who they chose was a problem. We'll rule out the eldest first, the Black Cloud Bodhisattva said. All right. Yunshu Bodhisattva nodded. Dragon Elephant Bodhisattva also nodded. If the large black dog saw this scene, he would definitely be extremely depressed. What was so bad about Grandpa Dog? What did they mean by ruling him out first? Could you guys give me a reason? Could you guys give me a reason? The second and youngest are both naturally gifted prodigies. The dragon elephant Bodhisattva said, "These two people are both qualified to become Buddha's son." "Then how should we choose?" the black cloud Bodhisattva asked. "Why don't we just let them have a battle? The victor will be the Buddha's son, while the loser will still be the seed. Looking at their future accomplishments, they can become official at any time," Yunshu Bodhisattva suggested. "All right." Agreed. The three bodhisattvas were the leaders of the Buddhist race of the West Heavenly Realm. Although there was a Buddha above them, named Haoyang, this Buddha had already lived for 110,000 years, and had long since reached the theoretical lifespan limit of a saint. He could die at any moment. Thus, this Buddha had long since become a kind of symbol, a kind of intimidation. Usually, he would be constantly in seclusion, maintaining a state of suspended animation, locking in the loss of life force so he could live a few more years. However, he was like a living corpse. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that he was better off dead than alive. Now that the three bodhisattvas had decided, the matter was settled. The entire stainless planet was aware that a new Buddha son was about to be born. It would either be Ling Han or Little Azure Dragon. The final battle was set to take place 3 days later. When the news spread out, everyone was excited. They were finally going to welcome a new Buddha son, and the Buddha son was a symbol, a place of sustenance for the spirit. Without the Buddha son, they would always feel that there was something missing. There were a considerable number of legends about the three milk tea brothers, especially the battle between Ling Han and Shi Yongyun. It was well known, and Ling Han was completely deified. Thus, the battle between Ling Han and the Little Azure Dragon also attracted huge attention. In fact, even the three bodhisattvas would attend. Very quickly, 3 days had passed. Ling Han and the Little Azure Dragon stood on a plaza, surrounded by spectators that numbered in the millions. These were all cultivators. It was just that ordinary people didn't have the right to come, or there would be hundreds of times more people. Even the three bodhisattvas were seated on the lotus platform, their expressions solemn. Behind each of their heads, there was a Buddha halo, pure and sacred. "Begin." After Shi Changtian asked for instructions from the three bodhisattvas, he announced the beginning of the final battle. "Second, I've already tolerated you for a long time. Let's have a battle today and see who's stronger," the Little Azure Dragon howled. Ling Han laughed loudly. "All right, then let's decide the victor." Hearing the two of them speak so grandly, everyone was naturally even more expectant. What kind of intense sparks would result from the clash between the two great prodigies? "Come! Come!" Ling Han and the Little Azure Dragon roared loudly, then charged towards the other. Their speed was extremely fast, as if they were streaks of light. This is truly terrifying. Merely this speed is enough to scare someone to death. No wonder they could become a candidate for the Buddha son. I concede defeat. I have no choice but to admit defeat. They are supreme prodigies. If this battle were to begin, it would definitely be even more intense and exciting. Everyone sighed ruefully. Just a glimpse was enough to know the whole picture. It was too awesome. Show. Ling Han and the Little Azure Dragon were already extremely close, and they both moved. Rock, paper, scissors. Fuck! All of a sudden, all the spectators were thrown off their feet, all of them wanting to throw up blood. This was a battle between prodigies? Fuck, what kind of battle between prodigies was this? Rock, paper, scissors? As expected of the second eldest. "You're just as I thought, we both showed paper," the Little Azure Dragon exclaimed in admiration. "All right, come again. This time I'll use my ultimate move. I'm definitely going to defeat you. Come." The two of them moved at the same time again. Both of them played rock, paper, scissors again. Again! Who? The wind blew past, and everyone felt a wave of disgust. Can't you guys be more dependable? How casual was it to use rock, paper, scissors to decide the selection of Buddha son? If this spread out, wouldn't it become a joke in the world? How was the Buddha son chosen? Oh, through rock, paper, scissors. How could they bring themselves to answer like this? Weren't they afraid that they would be humiliated to the ends of the world? Even the three bodhisattvas' expressions were dark. Just look, Even they had personally come to the scene to express their seriousness in selecting the Buddha son. But what was the result? Please, can you guys have a good battle? Be more solemn and more serious. Rock, scissors, paper. Ling Han and the little azure dragon continued to gesticulate as they roared. It was extremely intense, and it was as if a bloody battle were about to begin. The louder they shouted, the more speechless everyone became. Fine, these two guys did not care. It was clear that they were not willing to really fight to the death. Upon further thought, they were all slightly moved. For the sake of the position of Buddha-san, they were sure that a great many people could even disregard their fathers and sons, right? But these two, on the other hand, had placed their brotherhood in a higher position. Wouldn't it be better to be so loyal? A great many people were actually touched, and began to defend Ling Han and the little azure dragon from this angle, thinking that this was the best way. Otherwise, even if either of them won, and became the Buddha son, it would also cause the relationship between brothers to break down. In reality, Ling Han and the little azure dragon were completely playing around. If they were really forced into a bloody battle, who knows, they might accidentally use the techniques that they were skilled in. There were 3 Venerate tier elites here, so what if they saw through them? Thus, they thought of using rock paper scissors to decide the outcome. In any case, the position of Buddha son would fall on one of them, and the benefits would not flow into the fields of outsiders. This had actually been misunderstood as having a close brotherhood. After gesturing for half a day, Ling Han and the little azure dragon finally didn't make the same gesture. No, 2 wins in 3 rounds. The little azure dragon said shamelessly. I'll satisfy you, after a while. 3 wins in 5 rounds. 4 wins in 7 rounds. The little azure dragon lost more and more, and the upper limit of the duels was also continuously increasing. Meanwhile, the expressions of Yunshu Bodhisattva and the others were also getting uglier and uglier, as if they had all become as black as pots. Enough! The Black Cloud Bodhisattva stood up abruptly. Buddha-san is the second son of the 3 milk tea brothers, and he is bestowed the name Shi Xinming. Shua, the 3 bodhisattvas left at the same time, truly exploding with fury. The spectators also threw out things like apple cores from their hands. Was this the ugliest battle in history? Shi Changtian walked over, his expression not much better either. He forced out a smile and said, Congratulations, you have become the new Buddha son. Ling Han smiled and said, Then hurry up and bring me the Buddhist race's imperial technique. Shi Changtian rolled his eyes. Impossible! What? I, a Buddha son, am still unable to learn the Buddhist race's imperial technique? Then how am I supposed to compete with other imperial sons? Ling Han hurriedly called out. Hadn't he infiltrated the Buddhist race's inner circle just to learn the imperial technique? Or even the imperial scroll? What Ling Han lacked the most now was the imperial scroll. This was the last piece of the puzzle that would allow him to become the strongest. Without a great merit, how could one possibly learn imperial techniques? Shi Changtian tolerated him and explained. After all, this was the future Buddha son, and the signboard of the Buddhist race of West Heavenly Realm. No matter what, he had to show some respect. Ling Han was depressed. He had already become a Buddha son, yet was still unable to smoothly learn the imperial technique. No wonder Shi Yongming had been so weak in the past. Ling Han didn't argue. In any case, it was useless. He and the little azure dragon returned to the divine temple where they lived and continued to cultivate. However, while he didn't have any imperial technique, he did not lack cultivation resources. Since he had become the Buddha son, they naturally had to nurture him with all their might. Not only did Ling Han not lack cultivation resources, but even the little azure dragon wasn't inferior to Ling Han. He was still a seed of the Buddha son. If anything happened to Ling Han, he would step forward. Although the Buddhist race of the West Heavenly Realm couldn't compare to the real imperial clan, it was still much stronger than Holy Lands. It was not difficult for them to nurture 2 people at the same time. Ling Han and the little dragon naturally wouldn't monopolize the resources. They each took out a portion to share with the large black dog, ensuring fairness. With this endless supply of cultivation resources, Ling Han and the others improved very quickly. In half a year's time, they were close to reaching the end of the early stage of the true self. In Ling Han's mind, there were already 8 clay fetuses called true self. Although they were clay fetuses, they were all entwined by regulations and covered with seals, appearing indescribably mighty. "I'm still one short," Ling Han murmured. As long as he forged another true self, he would be able to complete the first form of the true self. He would be able to reform the 9 clay fetuses into stone fetuses, and allow his soul to undergo a qualitative change. "My current strength?" Ling Han casually threw a punch, and the void vibrated 13 heavens. His body art and mystical power both reached 9th heaven. With the burst of both, he would reach 13 heavens. One had to realize that even ordinary cultivators at the consummate level of the true self tier would only possess a power of 12 heavens. Ling Han had already surpassed them. Moreover, he hadn't reached the end of the first form of the true self yet. "I really miss the days when I pummeled the imperial sons and teased the imperial daughters," he mused ruefully. In these 2 years, he had been focused on cultivation, and it was as if he had not fought at all, which he was very unused to. Right at this moment, he was suddenly called over by Shi Changtian. "Xinming." Shi Changtian sat in meditation facing the Buddha statue. Sensing Ling Han's arrival, he turned around and looked at Ling Han. "What?" Ling Han faltered for a moment before coming to his senses. This was referring to him. His current Buddhist name was called Shi Xinming. Shi Changtian felt a muscle twitch in his cheek. He had never seen such an ignorant Buddha son. He coughed and said, "Our West Heavenly Realm has chosen you as the new Buddha son, and in the North Heavenly Realm, a new Buddha son has also emerged." Ling Han knew that the original Buddha son of the North Heavenly Realm had been crippled, and it seemed that it was Shi Yongming who had done it. Thus, after such a long time, it was logical that the Buddhist race of the North Heavenly Realm would select a new Buddha son. Thus, the Buddhist race of the 4 great heavenly realms planned to conduct another contest. Shi Changtian continued, "You and Wide Cloud's Heaven will go to the East Heavenly Realm and fight for the Buddhist race of our West Heavenly Realm." Ling Han was instantly energized, and he said, "If I win, does that count as a great merit?" Seeing Ling Han's bright eyes, Shi Changtian knew that Ling Han was thinking about imperial technique. He smiled and said, "Our West Heavenly Realm Buddhist race has always been ranked 3rd, so it's no fault of yours to be able to keep 3rd place. If you fall to 4th, we'll have to punish you." "What if I get 1st place?" Ling Han countered. Shi Changtian laughed in spite of himself and said, "In the countless previous competitions, it was Shirmoka from the South Heavenly Realm that had won 1st place. This boy's natural talent is outstanding and has been proficient in Dharma since childhood. It is very possible that he is the reincarnation of a great elite of our race. You want to defeat him? Absolutely impossible. What if I win?" Ling Han naturally wouldn't give up. "All right, if you can win, I will ask for instructions from the 3 bodhisattvas and teach you the 6 characters Bright King Curse," Shi Changtian said. "Deal," Ling Han said with a smile. "Naturally," Shi Changtian replied. He was not concerned either. In any case, the 6 characters Bright King Curse would eventually be taught to the Buddha son, and this was the standard. Thus, if Ling Han could really perform such a great merit, it wasn't impossible for him to teach it in advance. Ling Han returned and spoke to the little azure dragon and the large black dog. The 2 of them rubbed their hands together. The 6 characters Bright King Curse cleared the mind, and although it didn't have much destructive power, it was very practical. "Can you do it? If you can't, just let Grandpa Dragon go," the little azure dragon said. "This is the 6 characters Bright King Curse. I definitely have to get my hands on it." "Hee hee." Ling Han merely smiled faintly and couldn't be bothered to argue with the other about whether he could or not. "Oh, that's right. We haven't seen the holy daughter of the West Heavenly Realm yet," the large black dog said. "What does she look like? How mysterious. But who cares?" Ling Han didn't care. The next day, Yunshu Bodhisattva appeared. This time, he would bring Ling Han and Wide Cloud's Heaven to the East Heavenly Realm. Ling Han finally saw the holy daughter of West Heavenly Realm. She could barely be considered a beauty, but her figure was slender, and she had an otherworldly temperament that made one feel comfortable just looking at her. Very strong. This was Ling Han's second impression of Wide Cloud's heaven, and she had attained the third form of the true self, Heavenly Venerate, which gave him a very strong pressure. Wide Cloud's heaven glanced at Ling Han and revealed a faint smile. Buddha Son. Ling Han nodded, clasped his hands and said, "Greetings, senior sister." When it came to seniority among cultivators, it was naturally those with higher cultivation level that had higher status. Yunshu Bodhisattva tore a rip into the void. With a flutter of her sleeve, she had already brought the two of them through the void. A Venerate tier elite led the way, so their speed was naturally fast. After a few days, they arrived at origin planet of the East Heavenly Realm. This was the base camp of the East Heavenly Realm Buddhist race.